The men scream and suggest burning the witch. They also want her killed because she's dirty. People believe all the barns burned down because of her. They don't understand how they're supposed to survive now. The girl screams and protests, asking for the woman to be untied. She insists that Circinia has done nothing wrong. This fairy tale is terribly banal because it is a story about a simpleton who accidentally became the bride of an heir. One day, the main character woke up in the body of Circinia, who was the villain of this story. The main character had red hair and was a sorceress of the Belfar Empire. She controlled the power of fire using her abilities to easily gather and emit heat, which made her completely invincible, as no one in the Empire could defeat her. In addition to all the atrocities she committed, Circinia also disfigured the main character's mother, burned down half the Empire, and tried to kidnap and kill the heir. However, the prince managed to thwart her tragic plans and survive, which meant a death sentence for the sorceress. Unable to resist her wicked nature, she came to a terrible end. Circinia, her body was pierced with 15 arrows and then beheaded in front of the crowd. Her death was an attempt to demonstrate the heir's power, and in the end, everyone except Circinia finds happiness. The protagonist was initially terrified when she learned she had become Circinia and realized her destiny was in store for her. But for better or worse, she took possession of her body 3 years before the story began. The girl thought that she could change her fate because, considering that if she lay low and stopped her atrocities, she became interested in whether she could save her head. The lady thought that this was her first thought, but she wasn't afraid of the fire. After all, she understood that once they got it going, they just need to add a little fuel, and then she could escape without making much of a fuss. Seeing the clouds of ash, people will think that it simply burned to the ground. The man suggests quickly lighting a fire, and then wile it to capture the witch. When the lady saw the man, she didn't understand who he was or why he had come so suddenly. The stranger said he would free her, then took her hand and said she needed to be freed. At this point, the main character thought that this strange man seemed so familiar, and she simply couldn't push him away. The girl thought that this scent was familiar to her and thought it couldn't be true since they were completely different. The guy says he missed her. The man asks if she wants to end it there, but the woman places her bet and calls out the number 16, then announces that those are all her chips. At this time, the gentleman became interested in whether she felt like a rich woman with so many chips. The main character thought that everything belongs to her and believes that it's time to end it. The lady says that it simply takes her breath away, and the man who was standing next to her says that she has already won twice in a row, and then asks how she thinks this lady feels rich, seeing so many chips in front of her. Circinia thought it was all her fault and believed she had gone crazy and needed to break this bad habit. After all, she knew she now understood gambling addiction perfectly well and considered it to be sheer madness, but she had succeeded twice. At this point, the winning number was 16. All the gentlemen in the room were surprised and then began congratulating the winner. The girl thought about what she had done and believed that this was a turning point in her life, because with this, she could finally start a new life. So Circinia became famous for her luck at gambling, and 10 days had already passed since she took over Circinia's body. After all, she had only been reading a book and fell asleep and woke up as the heroine of the novel. The girl reflects on the fact that she would never have thought that this could happen because she knows that Circilia was a woman with flame-red hair, and she was described as a very beautiful woman. However, the main character also had a bad character because she was hot-tempered, arrogant, and the embodiment of rage, but no one saw her the other way because she was always alone. Only the villain whom everyone wanted dead, because when she read the novella, she thought it all so unreasonable. The girl understands that now her end has become hers. At first, the young lady almost went crazy, but she understands that there are still 4 years left before the beginning of the story, and Circinia's magical abilities were revealed in the middle of the novel. The girl thought about how no one would know she was a witch. She also suspected that perhaps such changes were God's will, and so she decided to live her own life. The lady wanted to make money, because with mountains of wealth, she could avoid the original ending. She also knows that a life of luxury is truly wonderful, and will definitely lead her down a flowery path. Circinia asks the worker why they don't have any money. He says he's sorry, but they don't have that much money right now, and then asks if there's anything else he can do to help her. The man says that the Viscount will soon arrive with money and therefore suggests that she wait. However, the lady objects and says she needs her money here now. After all, she invested all her savings here. The worker asks for a couple of days and then says that if she waits a week. But upon hearing this, the lady got angry and hit the table with her fist so hard that it broke. The main character claims that if he is not going to be next, then he should immediately give her money right now. The worker asks him to understand, since the gentleman said he needs time to collect the required amount. The lady says that's ridiculous, since she can't get money from the gambling house. Then she asks where her money went and whether he wants her to break anything else there. The main character thought about how she didn't show her strength in front of others, for fear of attracting attention. And then her anger took hold of her. Seeing the angry woman, the man says he'll give her some collateral and thinks she'll like him. She asks why the guy is offering to follow him. The worker reports that the Viscount recently acquired this slave. When the lady sees the child, she doesn't understand why he's a slave, then asks if he's laughing and whether he's offering to take the child as collateral. The man claims this boy is valuable enough to be used as collateral, then asks if she doesn't like him. He then reveals that the Viscount bought him for a very high price. Circinia asks if he's saying that his Viscount is short on money, but had enough for an expensive slave. She also asks if he really thinks she'll believe that nonsense. A woman hits a man and doesn't understand why her blood boils, and she wants to burn the place to the ground with rage. However, she understands that she shouldn't do this. She needs to control herself. Suddenly, she heard a voice asking her to calm down, because he was sure that if the lady took him away, the Viscount would definitely give her her money soon. And the boy asks her to save him. At that moment, she thought about how she needed to think clearly, because taking something is much better than taking nothing. The girl thought that she could be as angry with the staff as she wanted, but she would get her money. Then she looked at the boy and thought about how he was covered in scars, skin and bones, and looked simply awful. The lady asked how long he had starved to become like this, and thought that she couldn't leave him there. Using magic, she broke the chains and offered to come with her. Circilia says that she is taking it as collateral, and therefore wiles to convey her words to the Viscount, that if she does not see her money in a week, then only ashes will remain of his casino. When the girl came to her house, she thought that she wanted to earn money and put everything in order, but while there was no money, she had to somehow come to terms with what she had. The main character realizes she brought the boy home as collateral, and he's covered in wounds, but it's worth at least some healing. She then tells him she'll heal him. Hearing this, the boy screams and says that he is fine, and the lady says, "Count to 3. The boy quickly ran to the lady, and when she treated his wounds, she realized there were no serious injuries, only minor bruises. He asked how to address her. The lady suggests calling her Circinia and asks his name. Meanwhile, the boy is confused, and she doesn't understand what's wrong with him, since she didn't ask anything wrong. He explains that he doesn't have a name. The lady asks him how old he is, and he replies that he's 19. Hearing this, she thinks he looks about 16, and she wonders if it's true he's a year younger than her. She also thinks it might be because of the fasting. Circinia asks if he wants something to eat, but he insists he doesn't, and then says he might, if only a little. The lady says that if they don't eat the soup today, it will spoil, so she asks for help. And then she thinks about how this is her first time using magic in front of others. And she also thinks that it's just a small flame, so everything should be fine. The boy, surprised, asks if she's a witch. She replies that, like Togo, she's the only one in the empire, and therefore asks him not to tell anyone. He promises not to tell anyone. The guy asks the lady if she's lonely. She replies that she's not really lonely, she's just gotten used to it. At this time, the main character thought that only 10 days had passed since she ended up there. And before Circinia, she was an orphan like him. The stranger says she's very strong, and the lady simply suggests calling her Circinia. Gambling houses are a legal business in the empire. The Viscount built this establishment himself, which cost him a lot of time and money. Before legalizing his business and receiving the emperor's approval, he spent almost his entire fortune on supporting the nobility and ended up deeply in debt. After a year of hard work, the Viscount finally created it, and now he intended to pay off his debt and make a fortune at the casino. After all, people have always been drawn to big wins. They are creatures who will spare no expense to achieve their desires. The Viscount was raking in money and enjoying the high life until a monstrous woman appeared. She hit the jackpot 3 times in a row, and the Viscount's dream was shattered. Paying out the winnings will now result in bankruptcy because he used his subordinate as a shield to temporarily distance himself from her. When the gentleman entered his casino, he asked Louis in surprise what all the fuss was about. He wondered what had happened. Louis explains that that woman turned everything in this house upside down. Hearing this, the Viscount, surprised, asks if he means to say he couldn't handle one woman. The man explains that the woman is crazy. The worker reports that she broke a table in two with one hand and used a strange force. Suddenly, a wind blew, and the air became incredibly hot. The master doesn't understand how the wind could blow in a closed room and thinks that this guy, although an idiot, won't tell tall tales, and then he asks where the slave is. Louis says he had no idea how to stop her, so he gave it up as collateral. Hearing this, the Viscount screamed and asked how he dared, and then asked if he knew who this slave was. The Viscount was seriously short of money, so to compensate for his losses, he borrowed money from the richest man in the empire, Count Inicio. The Viscount knew that the Count especially liked young and handsome boys, so he decided to buy a slave for him. The master hits his worker with a stick and orders him to be found immediately and brought back. The Viscount understood that he had a meeting with the Count in a week, and he could not give her the coins now. But he was also obliged to return the fish, because he believed that there were no other options. Circinia began to get to know Ben a little, as one of his traits was honesty. The lady said he looked hungry and suggested they go eat, but the guy had eaten very little. The lady says that if he doesn't eat it, the food will spoil, and then she will have to throw it away. And then she says that she doesn't care whether he eats it or not. Ben thanked the lady, and she thought it was good that he ate. The main character understands that Ben must be used to slavery because he can't ask for anything even if he needs it. The boy apologized for eating so much. The girl explained that she would have thrown it away anyway, and then offered to eat more. He agreed. On the third day, the guy was washing dishes, and his plate kept falling and breaking on the floor. The lady suggested leaving it alone since she'd clean it up herself, and realized this was already the 5th plate. The boy says he's very sorry. She thinks it's not the first time, so she's not angry. The boy asks her to let him clean it up, but she objects and says she'll do it herself. However, the main character gave up the broom because she understood that he was very worried without work and that he still didn't have a name, and if he didn't work, he would go hungry for days. Circilia realizes that he has apparently developed a habit of constantly apologizing and then asks if everything is okay with him. The lady asks why he's apologizing, then takes the broom and says she'll clean it up herself, at which point she reluctantly hits him with a stick. Circilia suggests he go and change seats. The girl puts a cold compress on his finger and asks if it hurts. He replies that everything is fine and then apologizes again. And then he thinks about not talking about her. She's a wonderful person. And he thinks that maybe that's why he worries and makes mistakes. He just wants to show her his best side. The main character tells him everything is fine. Meanwhile, the guy is thinking about the extraordinary warmth emanating from her and considers her his light and his salvation. The lady suggests he be more careful next time. At this point, he doesn't understand the strange feeling and thinks it can't be true since he's grown taller. The guy explains that his legs hurt every night. She thinks about how much he's grown in just 3 days, and how quickly boys grow is amazing to her. All he needs to do is feed him, walk him, and wash him, just like a Tamagotchi. Circinia thought that she was proud of him, and therefore believed that she should feed him more often. The guy offers to bake bread today. She agrees and asks only to stand still. When the girl was sleeping, Ben woke her up because he had nightmares every night that made him tremble all over, and his body become cold as ice. Then the main character approached him and touched him, warming him with her warmth. The girl heard him asking for help and telling him to calm down because everything was fine now. At first, the lady tried to wake him, but he wouldn't open his eyes. Instead, he began sobbing and trembling as if he were sinking deeper into an abyss. She knew all she could do now was warm and soothe him, hoping he could sleep peacefully. Circinia wondered what he was dreaming about and thought it might be something from his past. Something powerful and deep, something he struggled with every night. She thought that perhaps normal people would never know such pain. The girl doesn't understand how she can force him to return to his old life and condemn him to plunge into these terrible things again. To avoid her own death, she needs money. She thought about at least taking care of the guy while he's with her. The lady looked at the boy and thought that he was having a nightmare again, and thought that his bangs must be to blame because his hair was getting into his eyes, and thought that they would take care of them tomorrow. When the main character touched his hair, the guy woke up. She thought that she had finally managed to wake him up, but she couldn't understand why she felt like she'd been caught doing something inappropriate. The lady says that he can continue sleeping because she was just fixing his hair. The guy says the lady's hands are very warm and pleasant, and thanks to her care, he hasn't been afraid to go to bed these days. She asks if he knew this. The young man apologizes and then explains that he was pretending so as not to bother her, and then thanks her for what she does for him. The girl wishes him good dreams, and he wishes her the same. Cercinia says she'll trim his bangs a bit and suggests it so he won't be nervous. He agrees. When the girl picked up the knife, she asked him if he was afraid she would cut him, and then asked if he trusted her. The young man said he was fine. The lady wondered if he could calm his legs then, as he thought very little could happen. She thought he seemed genuinely afraid, but he understood he'd had bad experiences in the past. Ben says that he doesn't know why they are shaking, and then suggests not to worry, because he thinks that everything really is fine. The lady says that then she will begin, and just trim it a little, and in a few minutes she will announce that everything is ready. Cercinia asked if he had a fever, as his face was completely red, and then touched his forehead. The boy wanted to run away, but the girl grabbed his hand and asked what was wrong. The lady asks why he's running, because he thinks that if he's sick, it will only make things worse. He says it's just that his heart is beating so fast. The lady asks if it's a heart attack, and then says she should take him to the doctor. He says that's not it, then insists everything is fine, and explains that he's feeling much better. Ben sits back down in the chair and asks for a haircut. She tells him to just sit still and not move. When he closed his eyes, the girl thought he was very cute. Cercinia asks the guy if he wants to look in the mirror, and also asks him to say whether he likes it or not. The young man looked in the mirror and said he simply wanted the warmth of his mistress's hands to remain in his hair forever. Hearing this, she thought about her heart beating so fast, and she wondered if she was having a heart attack. The girl asks if it's time for lunch, and the guy asks if he can help. The master asks how they are doing. The servant explains that he's sorry, but they're trying their best to find him. The duke reminds him that he said it was urgent, and the knight explains that they'll find him as soon as possible. The gentleman says that they are very useless, and then says that the curse will last for another year, 2 at most, and then says that they must bring this boy at the end of time, even if they have to break all his limbs. During the time the boy spent with his mistress, he grew and became even more beautiful, and his wounds healed. Cercilia saw that they were out of food and wondered how they had come to this. And then she thought that if she had taken her money back, then she wouldn't have run out of food. The guy asks what happened. At this point, the main character thinks that if she had taken the money, Ben wouldn't be with her, and she thinks that if he finds out, he'll feel guilty. The girl says she's been thinking about how she hasn't eaten meat in a while and is going to the store. He says he'll go too, but the lady objects and says he'll stay home while she goes alone. The guy started asking, but she objects and says that no means no, and therefore he should stay at home, and at that time she thought about how she could resist such eyes. The main character understands that she doesn't have any money anyway, and she doesn't want him to see how she sells her jewelry for it. Cercinia loved to dress beautifully, and spared no expense when it came to clothing, cosmetics, and jewelry. She spent almost her entire inheritance from her parents on these items alone. When the girl saw the diamond ring, she thought that, fortunately, she would not die of hunger. The young man asks if it's dangerous to walk alone. She replies that she's more afraid of leaving him home alone, then suggests she be a good boy and not break anything, as she'll be back soon. Ben went outside and waved to the girl, then said he'd wait for her. Meanwhile, she thought how nice it was to know someone was waiting for her at home. When the lady came to the jewelry store, she thought that she should receive about 20,000 shillings for the ring. The girl knows that Cercinia has loved jewelry since childhood and has an excellent eye for it. Moreover, she has a meticulous nature and tends to take good care of her belongings, so the jewelry has been preserved impeccably. The lady asks how much he'll give her. The man says there's a scratch on the ring, so he won't give much. Hearing this, the girl remembers that she'd checked it at home and nothing was wrong. The gentleman offers her to take a look, and says that the scratch is straight, as if it was cut with a knife, and then says that such a scratch could not have appeared with everyday wear. Hearing this, the main character doesn't understand who he thinks she is. The worker says she sees everything for herself, and then informs her that he can't offer her more than 10,000 shillings. Cercinia grabs the man by the hand, and he asks in surprise what she is doing, and offers to let him go now, because he felt as if his hand had been doused with boiling water. The girl asks if he can explain, and then shows her the object she's holding. He asks surprised what she's talking about, and then explains that he simply used it to open wrappers. The lady takes the ring, and he screams, asking her not to do it, then asks if she knows how much it costs. The lady says it looks exactly like the scratch on her ring. The worker claims she's crazy, and then asks what she did. Cercinia says that she suspects that he has been running his business this way for a long time, and then claims that this will not work with her, and suggests that it would be better to pay him nicely. The man says that even without a scratch, it's not worth more than 13,000. Hearing this, the lady objects, and says he's lying because she's sure the ring is worth 50. Then she asks if she's telling the truth. The worker asks if she's serious. The girl says that rumors might spread around town, and she's even curious about how things will go for him after that. The man agrees with her, and then asks how much he'll start with 20,000, but the lady insists on 50. The worker wanted to bargain some more, but the girl insisted on the amount she had said earlier. After all, she believed that it was worth paying nicely while she had the opportunity. When the lady had money, she thought it was time to go shopping. Cercinia thought she'd even bought more than she'd planned, and even regretted not bringing Ben with her. But she figured they'd go together next time, and at that moment, she thought there couldn't be a next time because they'd have to part ways in a few days. The girl thought that, although only a little time had passed, she had already gotten very used to him. But she understood that she shouldn't get worked up because she needed this money. Suddenly, the lady heard a man asking if they had seen a red-haired girl, a cheese that was a boy. The lady said she didn't think she had seen them. The main character realizes that there are no redheads there except Cercinia. She remembered that this guy exchanged her chips for money and doesn't understand why he's looking for her, and doesn't think he has good intentions since he looks very suspicious. The lady wondered if they wanted to get rid of her so they wouldn't have to pay off their debt. If that were the case, she figured she'd just get rid of them first. The lady understands that Ben is now home alone, and if the Viscount finds him, he may be in danger, and then she quickly hurries home. At this time, the young man thought that yesterday he had some strange feeling in his chest, and every time the girl touches him, his heart begins to beat so quickly, and he cannot get used to it. The boy understands that if he starts wanting more, he'll become a burden to Cercinia. He understands that he's already received warmth and care despite his background, and therefore believes that's enough. The boy understood that even if the girl seemed cold on the outside, she was actually a very kind person, and this was the first time someone called him by name. Ben thought that it was nice to know that the one who first gave him his name and called him by it was Cercinia, and her plump lips uttering such affectionate words. The guy doesn't understand what's wrong with him and thinks he must be crazy because he knows she's so kind to him that he allows himself to think such thoughts. He's deeply ashamed and therefore thinks he needs to go outside for some fresh air. The young man saw the dirty clothes and thought that he should take care of them since he knows how to wash and clean. And he also thinks that it would be great to also be able to cook, because then he could prepare the most delicious food for the lady. At this point, the lady asks the guy if everything is okay with him. He says everything is fine, and then asks what's wrong. The girl asks if anyone has come to see him, and he says no one has. She says it's a relief. The young man asks, surprised, what happened. She replies that nothing happened, that she was just scared that he was breaking plates again, and then asks what he's doing. Ben explains that he's waiting for her and hanging up the laundry. And then he thinks about how his heart is beating so hard that she's about to hear it. The lady says he is a good boy, and he says he will take the things. At this time, the main character does not understand whether she will be able to enjoy these feelings a little longer, although she thinks that over time, this desire will disappear. Louis apologizes, and the Viscount says there's nothing unexpected about it since he understands that he needs to prepare 30 million shillings. He believes that in 3 days she herself will bring them a slave, and therefore they need to prepare the money. The Viscount says that they will still have to pay money first to return the deposit, and once they receive the slave, they will follow her and find out where she lives. Louis, surprised, asks, "What then?" The gentleman says they'll get rid of her and return the money. The man says he understands, and to prepare the money, as he said. The guy offers the lady a try, but she refuses, suggesting he eat himself, since she has enough of her own for now. He says he's happy just to watch her enjoy her meal. At this time, the main character does not understand what is happening to him because she thinks that he is like a teenager in love. Ben suggests they eat quickly before it gets cold. The girl drops her fork, and he asks if everything is okay, and then says he'll bring another fork. Circinia doesn't understand what just happened and can't even believe she's in her right mind. She doesn't know why, but she likes tall, muscular guys, and no matter how cute he is, Ben is skinny and looks sick. And right now, she probably wants to take care of him like a little brother. When the guy came closer, the girl thought that she was really going crazy, and then said that she needed to go for a walk. The girl thinks she's acting weirder and weirder, and therefore doesn't want to forget her head. She says everything's fine and he can finish the rest of the meat. And then she thinks about how Ben will leave soon anyway. Lying in bed that evening, the main character can't sleep because she keeps thinking about the guy and believes he's simply embarrassed by her. However, she doesn't know why this affection won't leave her mind and believes it could develop into love, which is why she's paying attention to it. Circinia remembers that when she returned home, she was glad that everything was fine with Ben and thinks that she needs to stop thinking about it because she understands that when the novel begins, she can be drawn into this story against her will, and believes that therefore it will be better for him to be away from her. The girl thought that in 3 days she would exchange it and take her money, because she believed that she had to avoid the fate of the villain. With each day of approaching separation, her heart became heavier, but she understands that it doesn't matter what Ben or she feels, because she needs to come to terms with it. So that it would be easier for the guy to leave, she must distance herself from him. The main character became interested in, when he returns to the gaming house, whether he will fall into slavery again, and whether there is a way to help him. And then she asks where his family is now. Ben explains that his mother died when he was 13, and after that, he was enslaved and resold numerous times. He reveals that he had a name his mother used to call him, but that was so long ago that she no longer remembers it. The young man says that since he was alone, no one called him by name, and the first one to say it was Circinia. At this time, the girl thought that she simply asked because she knows that she cannot stay with him, because she understands that if the plot of the novel repeats itself and goes against her, then she will be finished off even if he does nothing bad. The baby believes that from this moment on, after becoming a Circinia, she is obliged to remain alone. The young man asks if he can finish the rest. At that moment, she realizes she needs to draw the line and says that housework is her job and she should do it herself. Time flew by, and the day of her separation from Ben arrived. He announced that he was ready, and the main character thought that he must have realized she couldn't leave him. And his smile, which said everything was fine, deeply hurt her heart. Ben said that the sun had already set and it was time for them to go. He took the girl by the hand and went first. At this time, the Viscount is thinking that if this girl changes her mind, he doesn't know what to do then, and he is in anticipation of her gift and is eagerly awaiting their meeting. The master thought the letter from the Count was an opportunity he couldn't miss. He believed this slave was a real find, able to satisfy the Count's needs and bring him a fortune. The Viscount says that the sun is setting, and then asks why they are not here yet. And when he looks out the window, he tells Louis that she has finally arrived. The gentleman says that she finally came for the money and thinks that she was not in a particular hurry, and then offers to remove the hood because her identity needs to be confirmed. When the Viscount saw the main character, he thought that he had absolutely not expected that she would be so beautiful, and it simply took his breath away. The gentleman offers to hand over the bail, and at that time, he thought that this guy had recovered and put himself in order, and it seemed to him that he had a good time there. At this time, the girl does not understand whether she is doing the right thing, because she knows that for them, Ben is just a thing, just a pledge, and she does not know whether it is better to leave him. The gentleman turns to the lady and says that there is no need to worry, because he believes that excellent conditions await him, because he knows a Count, and he will take excellent care of him. At this time, the man thought that if he was truly loved, Then he had nothing to worry about. Circinia asked how soon Ben would be leaving for him. Hearing this, the Viscount realized she had already given him a name and announced that they were leaving tomorrow morning. The gentleman thought that in comparison with all his previous places, he believed that he would be much better off in the Count's estate. Lewis says that she can check since there are exactly 30 million shillings there, and the master offers to take the slave to the basement. The man says all that's left is to sign the receipt. The girl asks why he followed her. He surprised asks what she's talking about. Circilia asks if he thinks she doesn't know it was his men who were looking for her. He explains that he was only trying to quickly give her money back and get the slave back. The lady says she'll turn a blind eye this time, but if he does anything else, he'll be very sorry. The Viscount smiles and says he'll keep that in mind. Lewis gave the girl a contract and asked her to sign it. When she signed, she felt her hands become so cold as if she had let go of something precious. And then she agreed, because what's done is done, because this is what she wanted from the start. At this time, the Viscount came down to the basement, and then he ordered the guy to be tied up and asked what hidden abilities she had. However, the young man didn't answer, and the master angrily asked how he dared look at him like that, then called him a pathetic slave who couldn't even say anything. He kicked the boy and said he'd find out for himself. The Viscount says that he only got his shoes dirty for nothing, and then tells us not to touch his face, since it's the only thing he has. The gentleman asks who his devotion is for, since he believes this woman traded him for money. The guy tells him not to dare touch her. The Viscount smiled and said that he was capable of doing something, and then he said who this woman was, but he realized that she had her own ball. At this time, the servant informs the master that they have found this woman's house, and he orders them to show him the way there. Ben screams and says he didn't touch the girl. The man tells him to shut up, then kicks him in the face and says he didn't mean to touch his head, but he thinks the Count will understand because he's a worthless slave. The gentleman offers to take the boy to the slums to wait there. The young man, screaming, declares that he will kill him if he touches the girl. Ben prays that nothing happens to her and that everything will be okay. At this time, the main character lying on the bed thought that she was about to go crazy and believed that she needed to move, because if she did something, she would think less. When the girl went out into the corridor, she saw a guy everywhere, and she realized that she had to pull herself together because then she would start hallucinating. Circinia remembered the guy's words that she was the first one to give him a name and call him. The lady reflects on the fact that she has changed her mind and believes that she needs to bring Ben back, even if she ends up being beheaded or pierced with a bunch of arrows. But she believes that she is obliged to take him. The girl thought that she was an idiot because she did not understand how a slave could live happily, even though he was in the Count's house. And then she took the suitcase and thought that she would return the money because while she was healthy, she could simply find a job. Suddenly, the girl heard someone ask her where she was going in such a hurry. And when she saw the Viscount and his servants, she couldn't understand what they were doing in her house. The gentleman asks where her hospitality is, and also wonders if this is the customary way to greet guests. Circinia says she can offer dog food, and then asks why they came. The gentleman smiles and says she's so impatient, and perhaps they should come in. At this point, the lady doesn't understand what he's up to, and says she didn't invite them. The master asks if she didn't want to go look for the slave. The main character asks where Ben is. He says that if he wants to know, he should treat his guests properly, since he believes she won't be able to meet him without him. The girl says she'll give him his money and asks him to return Ben. He asks why she's so concerned about this pathetic slave, then orders the servant to take the money and explains that people are right, because they're looking for more like themselves. Hearing this, the lady suggests repeating the sentence, and at this point, she became very angry. The men felt the heat, and the Viscount realized the strange power Lewis had spoken of. Then he declared that there was nothing he could do, and suggested finishing her off. In a few minutes, the main character dealt with all the attackers. She killed them with one blow and remained unharmed, and asked the Viscount if that's all. The master claims that she cannot finish him off, because without him, she will never find this slave. At this time, the main character heard a voice asking if she thought he deserved to die, and offering to rip out his vile tongue and put it in his throat so that he couldn't utter a word, and also to burn him without leaving a single hair. However, Circinia thinks that there should be no murders because she needs to control herself and understands that she should not give in to Circinia's instincts. The man smiled and said he saw that she had calmed down, then insisted that she truly valued this work. He added that the slave had also only talked about her when they beat him. The Viscount asks if she wants to see him again, but at that moment, anger overwhelms the girl, and everything around her is on fire. Louis says it's unbelievable, and the gentleman asks for help and rescue because he doesn't want to die. He says he was wrong and asks for help. The protagonist understands that Circinia's instincts are those of a true witch. She understands that due to her ferocious personality, she felt no guilt even when harming others and believes she was merciless. But once in her body, she realized that Circinia was enraged by the slightest provocation, and rage took over her mind. The girl understands that at times her ferocity consumed her, but she calmed herself by fighting these instincts because she does not want to meet a terrible death like her. The lady saw that everyone who came to her was plunged into eternal sleep, but as she approached the Viscount, she realized that, thank God, he was alive. She believed it was her fault, but if she allowed him to die, she would simply be following in the footsteps of the original Circinia. Louis asks what to do as he thought the Viscount was dead. The lady says that even though he's covered in burns, he's still breathing, and then explains that his master is to blame himself, and if he has a conscience, he won't blame her. The girl tells him not to even think about pursuing her. Louis suggests she wait, and then says that if she goes to the Cedri River pier, she can meet him. Circinia asks what he is planning, and the man gives her a suitcase with paper and offers to take it with her because she will need it. The lady realizes that these are Ben's documents and that there is money in this bag, and then asks what he wants in return. Louis says that he doesn't want anything because this money originally belonged to her, and then says that he will take care of the Viscount and suggests that she go before it's too late. The main character thought that she should tell Ben that she was sorry and apologize for her own stupidity, and also say that she wanted to be near him, but did not know since when. Meanwhile, the man turns to the tied-up Ben and tells him to move faster. He's also angry because it's because of these slaves that he has to work so late at night. Suddenly, the guy falls to the ground, and the man screams and asks why he can't move faster. At this point, the young man thought about how everyone treated him this way. But Circinia treated him like a human being, and was the one who helped him understand kindness and warmth. He missed her and wanted to run away to see if she was okay. The man kicks the guy and tells him to stop wasting his time, calling him a jerk. Then he says they're in no hurry, so he'll go have a smoke. At this time, Ben thought that he did not feel the warmth of Circinia, but the rain kept coming and coming, and how he wished that it would not stop, so that everything else in the world would be washed away, leaving only the girl's hut. The guy thought that he just wanted her to be happy, and then he heard the girl's voice calling him. The lady ran up to the young man and said she would free him, warning him that it might sting a little. He was surprised, not understanding what she was doing there, and thinking he was so desperate he must be imagining her. Circinia asks if he's okay. He touches her face and thinks he's not hallucinating. Then he asks if she's okay, since the Viscount said he'd find her. The girl looked at the guy and realized that his whole body was bruised. But despite this, he was not upset that she left him, and was even worried about her. The lady says she's fine and reports that he doesn't look well. The guy assures her he's fine. Circinia apologizes because she feels she shouldn't have left him. He says he's just happy to see her again and assures her she doesn't need to apologize. The girl says that she should be alone, doesn't know what this force can do, and looks at her hands, and then says that she's scared because she can harm him. The lady reports that she has been constantly thinking about him since she left him, and she could not forget his voice and facial features, and therefore she returned because she wants to be with him. At this time, the girl thought that he must not like it because she left him, and now says that she wants to be together again. Ben asks the lady to look at him and says that he constantly thought about her because his only desire is to be near Circinia, because his life is meaningless without her. Burned the slave documents and decided to find a place where they could settle down, because they wanted to start over in a place where no one knew them and go as far as possible without an end goal. The young people wandered aimlessly around the area, talking about the bustle of the world, and also saying that they preferred hotter regions and a warm atmosphere. On the third day of their escape, they found a village where they decided to stay. The village was called Moulin and was founded by free people. Thanks to the village chief, they found a small house a bit far from the village, as they preferred a quieter life. Walking along the main street, the girl thought that she needed to buy Ben new clothes. Cercinia thought that this settlement was known for its woodworking, and the carpenters were hard at work. The guy asks why she's so engrossed. She explains that she's simply interested in watching them work. He asks if she likes that type, and she replies that she's been more into cute guys lately. The woman thought it would be better not to tell Ben. The guy offers to take a look and says he thinks it would look good on her. The main character says it's cute, and then says he can buy it for her, and then asks why he said it would suit her. The young man says he's changed his mind, and she asks why. He suggests they watch some more. At this point, the gentleman asks if he's sure they're in the right place. The man says he's been there for a while and thought, given the amount of rubble, the hut must have been quite large. He then says they didn't burn it down. The man reports that he's been asking around and that this is where he was last seen. The gentleman hearing this says they're too late and thinks he needs to be returned to the Duke as soon as possible, but realizes there's almost no time left. The man saw a necklace on the road and realized that it was expensive and thought that he was not alone, and that since they did not take any valuables, they probably left in a hurry. The man thought that if the hut had been burned before they left, then they might have already gone far away, and therefore he would have to hurry before they went even further. The gentleman says that His Excellency hopes for speedy results, and he does not know who is with him, but if that someone gets in their way, he will greatly regret it. At this point, the main character thought about how calm she felt and how she wished it could always be like this, but she realized she never expected to fall like this. Cercinia asks the guy where he went since he's been gone since this morning. He says he found a job. Hearing this, the girl doesn't understand whether she's not bringing in enough money. Ben then announces that he's now a carpenter. The lady smiled, and at that moment, he looked at her and thought that she should not smile so beautifully, otherwise he would not be able to restrain himself. Ben realizes he can't ruin the moment because of his feelings and decides he needs to stop thinking about it. He suggests she take a break while he does the laundry. Cercinia says that working as a carpenter must be tiring already at this time. She realized that a lot has already accumulated there, and she also forgot her underwear in the drawer, and therefore thinks that she needs to urgently put it back before Ben sees. When the girl approached the guy, she saw that he was holding her underwear and offered to let him do the laundry for her. He objected, saying that her hands would get cold, and asked to let him do it. The lady screams and says it's her underwear. The guy tells her to understand him correctly because he was just going to wash his clothes and didn't even notice it was her underwear. She asks him not to say anything else and to leave it. After some time, the main character says that the abrasions have already healed and therefore thinks that it's good that they healed so quickly. One of the reasons she treats Ben is so she can see his naked torso, and she doesn't understand if she overreacted to her things. Cercinia thinks that everything was fine, but she doesn't understand why she behaved this way, and now she's terribly ashamed, but she thinks that she shouldn't think about it. The main character asks what that scar is on his left shoulder. He says he doesn't know either, and thinks it might be from childhood. Ben asks the lady if they can sleep together tonight. The girl thought that she allowed this to happen on the first day, and now they sleep together. And she also wondered if it was time for him to start sleeping alone, and thought that it was time to give up. Lying in bed, the main character thought about how she couldn't, because he looked at her so pitifully. She wished him good night, and he did the same. Ben asks if they can hold hands. She looks at him in surprise, and he says, it's just that her hands are really warm, and it will help him fall asleep. The lady realizes that she has often heard this phrase from Ben, and does not understand whether she should agree. The young man says that means it's impossible, so she offers him her hand, and he thanks her. At this point, the lady doesn't understand how anyone could refuse him, and thinks it might be because of her powers. But when they hold hands like this, she feels good. Cercinia realized she could feel his heartbeat, and that if anything happened, she'd be there for him. Then she looked at him and realized what he'd inserted, so she decided she didn't need to think about it. When the girl fell asleep, the guy kissed her hands, and at that time did not understand how he dared to do something like that, and then asked for forgiveness. The man reports that they've discovered they're in a village called Moulin. He says this village is located in the south, so he estimates it'll take 2 days to get there by horseback. Having received the order from the master, he immediately began a search, which took more than a month, and believes that it is impossible to delay any longer, even if they are not sure they will have to try. Sir thought that he had to achieve perfect results because this guy had to appear before the Grand Duke. The next morning, the young man tells the lady it's time for breakfast and then tells her he made it for her. The girl thought how his culinary skills were improving with each passing day, especially his potato bread. The potatoes are mixed with flour and then baked, which gives it a unique taste, and knowing how hard Ben tried makes the bread even tastier. Circinia looked at the guy and thought about how he had changed. Somehow then said that she thought he had gotten a tan. He said it was all thanks to hard work, and then smiled. The main character thought that she still liked to see this smile, and also liked to be around him. After breakfast, the guy says that he is leaving, and the girl wishes him luck and walks him to the door, and she does this every day as if they were a married couple. When the lady was alone, she thought about how calm she felt because Ben did all the housework, and she thought he'd get his first paycheck today, and she was eagerly awaiting it. She considered whether a gift would be unnecessary, but she'd at least make Ben some soup since he cooked for her every day. Circilia thought that she hadn't used her skills for a long time. Meanwhile, the man tells Ben that this is his first paycheck and then asks what he'll do with it. He replies that he wants to buy a gift, and the man smiles and asks if he wants to buy a gift for his live-in girlfriend. The boy realizes he can't just call Circinia someone he lives with. She's his savior, his ray of light, his protector. But he realizes he really wants to be her protector and doesn't know what to say. The man says that if they're not dating yet, they definitely will be soon, but Ben objects, saying that's not true at all. And then he thought about something he hadn't even dared to consider, and he began to wonder if it was even possible. The young man reflects on how when he sees her, he is overcome with heat, and he wants to kiss those beautiful lips, and wants to hug her, and just thinking about it, his desire grows like a needle piercing a balloon of water. The worker smiled and said that if they weren't dating, she must be his wife by now. The guy said he was going back to work. At the end of the workday, Ben realized he needed to hurry before the store closed. He went into the store and bought a gift for the girl, hoping she'd like it. However, on the way, a man stopped him. At this time, the main character thought that her soup turned out well, and since the sun was about to set, Ben should return soon. Circilia, sitting and waiting, realizes that he is late, and when it gets completely dark outside, she doesn't understand why he hasn't returned yet, and thinks that something might have happened to him, and she should go look for him. The girl reflects on the fact that she doesn't even know where to look for him and will just wait because she thinks he will come soon. The lady asks the worker if he's seen the guy. He tells her that Ben left right after work yesterday and says he should come back soon because someone is waiting for him at home. The main character walked down the street and asked the people she met, but they knew nothing and could not give her an answer. Circinia came home and then looked at the soup she had cooked today and realized that Ben had simply disappeared. The lady was brought to her senses by a girl who asked why she was not sleeping on the bed, and then said that she was at the front door. At this time, the main character thought that she was not in her room again, but somewhere else. The young lady asks if she is okay, because she thinks that the lady is probably hungry, and then asks if she has eaten. Circinia replied that it didn't matter, then lay down on her bed and thought about how she'd had that dream again last night. It was a dream in which she was helplessly waiting for Ben. The lady realizes that when she dreams of him, she has a headache all day. The blonde girl asks if her headaches are still bothering her. She replies not to worry about her and asks him to leave. The girl says the mistress always behaves like this and then says she's not going anywhere. The lady says she'll give her money, but the little girl says she'll still help her because she thinks no one else cares for her. At this point, the main character thought about how persistent she was, and that even if she told her to leave, the girl would stay. However, she doesn't want anyone around, even if they are with her now, because she knows they will leave too, and the girl will be alone again. Circinia realizes that May has grown a lot since their first meeting. The lady recalls that while she was walking down the street, she overheard a girl talking, then explaining that she wasn't playing. But the man said she was a brat, and then hit her. The baby screams and says that she did nothing and touched nothing, and then covers her head with her hands. At that moment, a lady approached him and then pushed him. She asked the baby if she was okay, and also wondered if she could become one. After all, that's how she met May, and 2 years had already passed, and she couldn't pass by, because she reminded her of him. The girl tells the lady that they will be delivering furniture from Moulin today, and thinks that they need to buy a new table, and therefore suggests going. May reports that she was very surprised when she broke it in half. At that moment, the main character thought about how the Moulin was the last place she and Ben lived, and she stayed in that house for another year in hopes that he would return. Cercinia understood that there had been no news of him and that he had simply disappeared. For months she was furious and thought that if he had wanted to leave, he should have told her, but she couldn't even tell him that, and all she was left with was despair. The lady thought that she had only spent a few days with Ben, and therefore believed that she had nothing to grieve about, as she assumed that perhaps he was living his own life somewhere and was not thinking about her. Then the main character left the Moulin, and 3 years passed. She realizes that the events of the novella are about to begin. Cercinia thought she was very tired, and therefore thought she needed to go for a walk. Then asked the girl if she had eaten yet. She replied that she was going to eat with Madame. The lady says she's going for a walk and offers to help her get something to eat. May asks where she's going. The lady replies that she'll go alone. The girl then asks her to be careful. The protagonist thought about how, on that day 2 years ago in the pitch darkness, she became her ray of sunshine. At this point, May thought she was acting coldly, but she knew that Cercinia cared about her, because she understood that if they wanted to kick her out, they would have done so long ago. But her mistress is a very kind person. The little girl doesn't know why, but sometimes the lady looks like she's dying. She looks out the window, and in those eyes there are only burnt wastelands, and that's why she decided to always be by her side. May thought that while she was away, she would make some potato pie, because she thought the lady would definitely like it. At this time, the main character, while walking, thought that she was getting better, because she heard about the floss, she again thinks about Ben and believes that it is worth going to a more crowded place, so that the crowd will carry away all her thoughts. Cercinia thought about how worn out May's dress was, and remembered the little girl's words, that even if she bought her new clothes, she would take care of this dress. The lady reflects on the fact that the girl has always worn the same thing, and therefore today she will buy meat and a new dress for her. Suddenly, the man grabs the lady by the hand and says that they haven't seen each other for a long time, and then asks where she's going. The lady said he didn't need to know, then slapped his hand away. She thought about how midges are always more annoying, but Charles, the headman's son, was especially persistent, as he once even snuck in at night and scared the little girl. Charles fled when he encountered May, who had woken up at dawn. The little girl didn't see his face, but she was sure it was Charles. If it were an ordinary thief, something would have disappeared from the house, but the baby would not have remained unharmed. But the main character understands that, in addition, he is madly obsessed with her, and consider him an annoying bastard. Cercinia thought that he remained safe only thanks to the girl's intervention. Otherwise, he would have gotten it, and far from the table. The main character does not understand whether there is a reason why someone like him can freely roam around the village. Charles, as the village chief's son, wields considerable influence in the settlement and can do whatever he pleases. This is because his father communicates with the Lord, and the lady understands that it's easy to understand why he would come to a lonely woman's house in the middle of the night. Cercinia turns to the boy and tells him not to think she doesn't know. Hearing this, he says he was surprised when she stopped so suddenly, and then asks if she can prove it. The girl thought he was a dog because there was no evidence, but he continued to provoke her. She said he'd better behave because he'll get into trouble if she finds evidence. Charles tells her not to leave, but the girl doesn't respond to his request. He knows there's no one in the village who could ignore him, because everyone wants at least a little of his attention. The young gentleman doesn't understand why he should seduce someone like her, and believes she will become submissive if he just puts pressure on her. He thinks there's no need to be kind. Charles recalls that he told her to stop, and then wanted to grab her, but the girl turned around and grabbed him by the neck. At this time, people who were on the street paid attention to them, because for them, it was surprising that the young master could be treated like that. At this time, the guy thought that she was very strong, and he could not breathe. The main character thought that this would be enough of a warning. Then she says that she reacted because he made advances toward her, and considers it pity. The lady understands that many saw that he tried to attack, and even as the son of the head, he will not be able to do everything he wants. Charles, crying out, asks the boy what he's looking at, and then says he doesn't look like some kind of sculpture to be looked at like that. At that moment, he thinks it's so humiliating, and he won't forgive her. He believes the girl will definitely bow her head to him. Suddenly, the young gentleman heard someone calling this lady a witch. The man said that she ran away and believed that she shouldn't be here. Charles asks what he's talking about. The man replies that the girl is a monster, a fire witch, and the gentleman says he'd like to hear the details. When the main character came home, the little girl asked in surprise if she had brought this table herself, and then said that she was so strong. Circinia gives the girl a gift and says it's a dress for her. Surprised, she asks if she can keep it for herself, and then says it's very beautiful. At this time, the girl thought about what she liked so much, because she had never been given such beautiful gifts before. The lady reflects on the fact that she is actually very happy that this little girl is with her, and at this time, she just wants the novella to quietly go its own way. But in the end, she invested too much emotion in some characters, and does not want to be hurt again because of this. The woman thinks that enduring this pain once was enough. At that time, the gentleman, being in the forest, thought that it was very quiet and very boring, and he would like to finish and leave, because tomorrow they were waiting for him, and he really wanted to return. Suddenly, the man smelled a strange smell, and thought that something was burning, and when he walked a few steps, he saw that the warehouse was on fire. In the morning, the protagonist realized she had woken up in the wrong room again. She usually woke up within the house, but today, in the garden, she wondered if Circinia had also experienced the walking around without realizing it. The lady thought that she needed to lock the door, so that she could open it only when she was conscious, and at that time she felt that she was getting cold, and then went into the house. The baby says that the mistress took a bath and slept almost all day, and then asks if everything is okay. She replies that everything is fine, and May asks if this is true, since the mistress doesn't look well. The girl asks if she knew that there was a fire last night, and it looks like the fire spread from the warehouse, and all the supplies burned, and then asks what the guards were doing, because she doesn't understand. Hearing this, Circinia reflected on how well she was handling the conversation alone. The girl continued to explain that they said the fire didn't start by itself. She explained that if the criminal was caught, the entire village would punish him. The lady agrees with her, and then points out that the warehouse contained all the winter supplies. The girl says that if the criminal is caught, he won't be left alone. Suddenly, they heard a scream that the house belonged to a witch, and that she should come out. Hearing this, the girl begs the lady not to go out, as she believes something evil is happening outside, and claims it's dangerous. The lady calms her down, and says that everything is fine, and then says that she needs to check something, and therefore suggests not to follow her, but just wait. A man from the crowd says that she is the evil witch who burned their supplies and did not even escape. Charles points his finger at her and asks how she dared to burn their food, and then says that she should accept punishment, and calls her a witch. Circinia asks if they're sure she's the arsonist. The young master insists she did, and that's why he'll be keeping an eye on her from now on. The lady asks what he's even talking about. He replies that she doesn't need to justify herself, since they have a witness who saw her set the warehouse on fire. Charles approaches the man and asks him to tell him what he saw. He hesitantly replies that while he was on patrol, he saw a warehouse on fire. The man asks him to continue and tell who set the warehouse on fire, and asks if he wants to brag to his girlfriend. The man points his finger at the lady and screams, saying that this woman set him on fire because he saw her running away. Circinia asks if he saw her run away. The master tells her not to even try to intimidate that guard, because they know everything now, and she did the same thing to Aaron's hut. Hearing this, the main character thinks that this is impossible, and does not understand how he knows this. At this point, the young gentleman thought she was panicking, and then informed her that what the other man had said was true. He asked if burning down the hut wasn't enough, and she decided to attack their village. Then he declared her an evil witch and ordered him to capture her. At this time, May takes a broom and says that Circinia was with her when the fire happened, and she was in the house with her, which means that what was said is a lie. Charles says something about her being her accomplice, and therefore wags to grab both of them. The main character thought that they were creatures, and maybe she was safe thanks to her magic, but not this girl. The guy says that if she surrenders, he'll let her go. Hearing this, she thinks he's a bastard. She wants to kill, but the girl turns to her and asks her to run away quickly. At this time, Charles thought that Circinia had finally been caught, and he was telling her to tie her up. After a few hours, the young master says that it is a pitiful sight to see her in prison, and then he says that he will still give her a chance, but she must bow down and beg him, and then he will tell her father to let her go. Cercinia thinks that it is not even worth listening to him, and says that she thought she heard some dog barking. Hearing this, the guy became very angry, and then asked why she did not realize her situation, and then said that if she did not beg him, she would be burned, and also again told her to bow before him. The lady says it's sad because he won't even get her fingers. He asks if she wants to die and then kicks her through the bars. The main character thought that perhaps she really wants to die because she has lived this meaningless life for a long time, just like Cercinia in the novella. Despite the wealth and delicious food, she does not feel anything. The girl thought that she was so tired, and it was like 4 years ago when there was no one with her. Charles says they'll see how long she lasts, and then stop spouting this nonsense. She thought it was pointless because she wanted to close her eyes and open them when it was all over forever. When the lady came out onto the main street, the men screamed and said that she should be burned, and one guy even took a stone and threw it near her, and then screamed and said that she could not be saved with the help of her dark magic. Cercinia doesn't understand what dark magic he's talking about when he can't even throw a stone properly and still blames her. The lady understands that they blame her for all their failures, as the name suggests. It's a witch hunt. The girl thought that it was very difficult because she wanted to live quietly and peacefully, but people always stood in her way, and it was as if she was destined to be a villain. At this time, May comes out of the crowd and screams, telling them to let this lady go. The main character thought about how this little girl should take care of herself in this situation and remembered that she really is like Ben. And even if she wants to forget, she can't, because his existence is forever burned into her heart. Cercilia understands that she realized this when he was worried about her, even though he himself was covered in wounds, and therefore believes that she must not do something she will regret. After all, everything she did was only to survive, and until this is over, she cannot die. The main character believes that she can't continue living in this village anyway because of the people who are planning to kill her. She realizes that burning everything down and escaping shouldn't be difficult. Since they already know about her powers, they won't look for her in other settlements. The girl thinks that when they start burning her, she will intensify the flame and will be able to escape without any particular difficulties, and she will leave with May. Charles invites the crowd to watch because he thinks that this witch is giving up, and then turns to the lady and says that her death is approaching, and also asks if she is scared, because all these people are waiting for her to burn. The gentleman gives her one more chance to tell him to help her, because he thinks it would be terrible if her life ended this way. Cercinia spat in his face in front of people, and he says she's a crazy bitch. The main character thought that everything was going according to plan, and that she would leave all her grievances against them in the fire, and therefore believed that she only had to wait a little longer. Suddenly, a gentleman from the crowd orders Charles to be seized, then claims it's an order. He asks in surprise what they're doing, and then asks if they know who he is. The man turns to the lady and asks for forgiveness, and then says that he will now untie her. At this time, the main character does not understand what is happening, and she is interested in who these people are. And when she saw the young gentleman, she became interested in who he is, because she sees him for the first time, and he knows her name. A stranger takes a lady's hand and then kisses her. She asks in surprise what is going on, and doesn't understand why he doesn't let go of her hand. For a moment, it seemed to her that this guy was Ben. Cercinia thought that it couldn't be. It was impossible, but they weren't alike at all. But this smell seemed very familiar to her. She asks if his name is Ben. He replies that it is, and then says that she is his Cercinia, whom he missed very much. The young gentleman says that she has lost a lot of weight, and then says that he is late, because he thinks that he came too late, and asks for forgiveness for this. At this time, the main character thought that his low voice was so different, and she began to wonder if it was really Ben, because she couldn't believe it. At this time, the guy does not understand how he dared to leave marks on Cercinia's hands, and therefore he says that he will finish off this despicable person. The girl realized Ben had raised his sword and said he would kill Charles. She couldn't understand whether that child had grown into a man capable of such a thing, and he seemed so unfamiliar to hers. Charles, surprised, asks why they detained him, and who they are anyway. At this point, the young gentleman thought that if he had been just a little bit late, he wouldn't have known what would have happened to her, and therefore believes that murder would be too merciful a punishment. The lady approached the gentleman and asked him to stop, but at that moment, she thought that she couldn't allow Ben to become a murderer. She again reminded him that she had told him to stop. Circinia asks why he's come, and then she thinks about how the teenager who was her height has now grown into such a strong man. His narrow shoulders broadened and his face unblemished. He has a magnificent, ornate sword, and anyone would say he lives comfortably. The main character understands that he's doing well, and that she's the only one who's been suffering because she thought something terrible had happened to him, and that's why he couldn't come to her. She thinks it seems all her fears were unfounded, and she feels like a fool for worrying about him. The girl asks why he came. The guy will be interested in what she's talking about. The lady says that if he's finished with his business, then he should leave. The main character thought that for 3 years she had been alone all this time, and if she had been alone from the very beginning, she would not have suffered so much. But having once felt someone else's warmth, loneliness turned out to be even colder, and she was in pain because of this cold, and she did not even remember how she lived. Circinia believes he simply vanished on a whim without a word, and now stands before her. He doesn't explain, but she understands she doesn't need an excuse. When the main character was at home, she heard someone calling her May, asked if she could go out, and also wondered if she could just open the door. However, the lady objected, saying she didn't open it, and then told her to pack her things because they were leaving. The little girl asks in surprise if they can live in this village, because she understands that if they continue to wander, it will be tiring. The woman says that it doesn't matter, and at that moment, she thought that because she is not nice enough to just leave. At this time, Ben, sitting under the lady's house, asks if he came too late. Circinia understands that this guy is calling her, and the little girl says that it seems he is waiting outside. The lady doesn't understand what she's feeling, because she wants him and doesn't want him at the same time. Meanwhile, May wonders if he can ask, because he's so curious, and then wonders if the woman is angry. The mistress asks what she's talking about, and the girl explains that, if not, she doesn't understand why she was so cold to him. And then she thinks she shouldn't have asked, but she wanted to know if it was him the mistress was looking for in her dreams every time. May thinks that now is clearly not the time, because it can only get worse. The main character thought about how even a little girl who knows nothing can see right through her. Then she tells him that 3 years ago he disappeared without a word, and now he's suddenly reappeared. May asks if she's angry. Lady replies that she is, and the girl asks if she's angry that he left silently. Circinia thought she was angry with him, and it was all so obvious, but he disappeared without saying a word. And so she was angry and upset because they treated her like someone they could easily abandon. Missed him, she still decided to let him go. May says she would have done the same in her place since she hadn't said a word for 3 years. The woman says she's probably angry, and then asks the little girl to help her with something. May informs the gentleman that Circinia won't be coming out because she doesn't want to see him. Upon hearing this, the man realizes that the girl lives with Circinia, and then asks how long they've been living together. The baby replies that she's almost 2 years old, and he asks if she's okay. The girl replies that the lady is fine, and then thanks him for helping them today. Ben asks if she's hurt. The girl replies that, fortunately, everything is fine, and so he can leave, as it's the mistress's wish. She says she's relayed her message, and then bids farewell. At this point, May thought that this was her mistress's request, but she felt sorry for him because he looked so sad. She understands that she's always on Circinia's side, but she also wants to help him. But her mistress comes first, and it can't be any other way. Ben asks his assistant how everything went. He replies that the land belongs to Count Dexter, and the suspect has already been detained, claiming to be the son of the village head. The young master ordered his execution, and upon hearing this, the assistant was surprised and thought it was risky. After all, less than a month had passed since he inherited the title, and his position was still precarious. Furthermore, Count Dexter is a vassal of the Duke of Kalos. He believes this could be seen as a political move against him, but he understands that this accusation is baseless. The man thought that he could mention the lady with red hair, because his master had thought about her every day for the past 3 years, and thought that it might work. The servant turns to His Excellency, and then asks for forgiveness, and informs him that he does not think she would like it if she found out. Hearing this, the gentleman thought that Arshian was right, because Cercinia was against murder, and believed that it seemed that rage had clouded his mind. The gentleman says they can leave him for now, but first they need to find out everything about the Count and prepare a report. He asks the informant if he's okay, and the assistant replies that the guy did a good job. Archie asks how much he'll let her know. The gentleman considers telling her everything, just so she'll forgive him, because he wants her to open the door and look at him. Ben thinks that it doesn't matter if she hates him, and decides to take revenge, but he will accept her feelings, whatever they may be, and will tell her anything just so that she is there. The young gentleman thought that if Cercinia looked at him with the same tender gaze as 3 years ago, he would not be able to restrain himself and would not tell that shameful truth. Ben believes that he cannot give up even if his desire exceeds his capabilities, because he wants to be someone the girl can rely on. The gentleman tells Archie that he can go because he will wait for the lady and will wait until she forgives him, and he understands that this could be eternity, because all these 3 years he held on only for this moment. At this time, the main character thought that she had fallen asleep for a short time and remembered that the weather was the same that day and it was raining outside. Cercinia became curious whether the little girl had collected the washed clothes and therefore decided to check and then went outside. The woman saw the man and was surprised because she did not expect to see him. Ben was all wet and she asked him what he was doing. He turned to her and said he was wrong, and then asked her not to leave him. The lady invited him inside because he was soaking wet and shivering. She lit a fire and told him to wait while she checked to see if she had any clothes for him. Ben says that he will go with her, but the lady objects and says that he is all wet, and therefore suggests sitting near the fire. At this time, the main character thought that his body had grown, but his character was still the same. When the girl returned to the room, she asked the guy what he was doing, and then realized she'd only been gone a couple of minutes. She said the bathroom was behind that door, and suggested she change into this. When he saw his old clothes, he was surprised, and said he thought she'd thrown them all away. Cercinia said she'd simply forgotten, and then thought that while that was only half true, she couldn't throw them away, and thought he didn't need to know. The young gentleman asks if her wrists are okay. The lady thinks he's a fool for being so cold and worried about her. She tells him everything is fine, and then suggests he stop biting his lips. When the girl touched him, she felt that he was cold, and therefore thought that nothing could be done because she would have to help. Ben thought about how her hands were always as warm as he remembered, and then said he was constantly thinking about her. She said this was only a temporary measure, and therefore suggested they hurry up and take a bath. The main character doesn't understand why she can't look him in the face, and then tells him to go because she's not going anywhere. Cercinia thought that after she washed, she would pour him some hot tea and ask him what happened, because she thought that maybe he had reasons. The girl saw the guy's jacket on the floor and thought it needed washing too. She thought this was the first time she'd seen this coat of arms, but she couldn't understand why it seemed so familiar. A roaring lion flanked by 2 snakes. At that moment, a guy came out of the bathroom and said she looked very pale and asked if she was cold. She asked who he really was. Ben wonders what she's talking about. He asks why his buttons have that coat of arms. At that moment, the lady thought about something she'd never seen in person, but she'd read about it as it was worn by one of the crown prince's confidants. This is the coat of arms of the noble house whose men hunted Cercinia in the original story. She asks why his buttons bear the coat of arms of the Grand Duke of Shorbars. In the novella, the Duke was called the Crimson Lion of the Empire and described as a cruel figure who came to power by murdering his father. The protagonist can't believe he was brought as a slave as collateral, knowing he was a kind child who cared for others more than himself. Cercinia thinks that the Ben she saw yesterday was truly scary, and thinks that maybe he really is like that. The dark-haired guy says he can explain everything. She asks his real name. He replies that he's always been Ben, but now his name is Alexander Shorbars. The main character was surprised to hear this. He says he'll tell her everything she needs to know. The guy says that 3 years ago he learned his real name, and on the day he disappeared, the Grand Duke's people took him against his will. Ben explains that for 3 years he was trained as the heir to a noble house, and after the death of his father, the Grand Duke of Cantry Shorbars, he inherited his title. Having heard this girl thought that, in the original story, The Grand Duke was killed by his own son, and she does not understand what happened because she wants to ask how, but she lacks the determination. Ben apologizes because he thinks he should have found her sooner and then claims it's his fault. She says he could have just texted her. The young gentleman, surprised, asks if she's received any letters. She asks what he's talking about. He says it's not important and suggests they forget it, then says he wanted to meet her. At this point, the lady thought about how they had met, and he had told her he was Alexander Shorebars. Then she said she understood what had happened and asked why he had returned. Cercinia knows that in the original, he was the crown prince's subordinate and asks if he was sent to capture her. He explains that this is not the case at all. The lady then asks why he's here, and then insists that he's better be honest with her because they once decided to be together. She reminds him that back then, on the pier, they promised to always be together. Ben claims that he never forgot about that promise, and then claims that he wants to be with her and asks if she will go with him to the capital because she believes that here they are always trying to harm her and thinks that it is too dangerous. The main character does not understand how he can be sure that the capital is safe because she lives here precisely because she does not want to get involved with the main characters, and she is trying her best to live a life different from the original. Cercinia says that 3 years ago she would have believed him, but not now, and then suggests that he go himself if he wants, since she has no reason to follow him. He says that if that's the case, he'll stay no matter where, but asks her to simply let him be with her. Hearing this, the main character does not understand what it means, and he says that he is to blame for everything, and therefore asks her to forgive him. The girl slaps his hand away and says she's waited too long. Ben says he knows he was wrong, but she says he shouldn't look at her because she can't kick him out in this weather and offers to stay until the rain stops. The little girl tells the lady that she woke up very early and then asks in surprise why this gentleman is here. Cercinia asks if she's hungry because she's going to make breakfast. The girl says she's hungry and then claims it's her job to cook. The lady says whatever she wants today. At this point, the young gentleman thought it was strange. She hadn't received his letters, and he didn't understand why he also believed someone had interfered, and so he'd have to find out. When Ben fell asleep, he was awakened by a strange sound, and then he saw a girl in his room. He got out of bed, then went up to her and asked if she was okay. The guy realized that she was sleeping and thought that she must have been in the wrong room, and then he picked her up and thought that his scent was making him feel hot all over, and that was driving him crazy. The young gentleman understands that he must come to his senses and take Cercinia to bed, but he does not know where her room is, and therefore leaves her in the living room. May asks him what he's doing in the middle of the night. He says he didn't do anything, and she suggests that she must have come into his room. The little girl says she's asleep but acts like she's awake. He asks surprised what that means. The young lady replies that the mistress is sleepwalking. Ben says he wants to know more and asks to tell it. May reports that when she met Cercinia 2 years ago, she was already sleepwalking, and this used to happen quite rarely, but now these cases have become more frequent, and therefore she believes that the lady began to suffer from sleepwalking even before their meeting, and she lost a lot of weight because she hardly eats. The girl says that she doesn't know, but she thinks that she's feeling better now, and at that time she thought that he should have come earlier. Ben says that he will take the girl to her room, and May says that she will show him where she is. The young gentleman looked at the sleeping Cercinia and thought that she looked so beautiful that it was like a dream, but as soon as he looked away, she disappeared. But he realized that the girl in front of him was real. Ben reflects on how he never imagined it would be so hard to see her again. He turns to her and asks her to take care of her health. He says he really wants to hold her close and touch her lips because there's no one more important to him than her. The guy says that he will wait for her, and until then, he will always be by her side. In the morning when the main character woke up, she thought that she was at her bed, which meant she hadn't gone anywhere that night and hadn't slept like this for a long time. Suddenly, the girl saw a guy next to her bed and couldn't understand why he was sleeping in that room. She touched his hand, and he grabbed it, and they ended up on the floor. Cercinia asks what he is doing and also asks if it hurts. He replies that everything is fine because he is used to it. Hearing this, the main character does not understand what he is used to, and she is interested in what he has been through over the past 3 years. The guy says that it is her hand, and at that time, the girl thought that it seemed like she touched something and then removes her hand and asks for forgiveness. Ben says he should apologize. Then the lady leaves the room and walking down the hallway doesn't understand what came over her so early in the morning. Suddenly, the lady saw a man who wished her good morning. She asked who he was. The man said he was His Excellency's assistant, Archons. The main character remembered that it was he who helped her back then, and then informs her that she is Circinia. He kisses the lady's hand and says it is an honor to meet her. Ben asks what he's doing. Archie explains that they were just saying hello and says he simply misunderstood. At this time, the main character does not understand why he is apologizing. Ben says he thinks he should wash his hands before eating. Meanwhile, the girl is thinking about how the assistant is acting strange and thinks she should feed him before leaving. Circinia turns to Archie and says that if he hasn't had breakfast yet, he can eat with them. May asks if she overdid it with the salt. The lady objects, saying no, not at all, because the food is very tasty. The assistant says it's delicious and thanks for the invitation. Archon thought that the two were trying not to look at each other, and the gentleman was worried about something and therefore thought that it was better to finish quickly. May says that she is full and thanks Archon for the food. He says that he will wash the dishes, but the girl objects and says that it is her job and therefore suggests just leaving it. The gentleman approaches the man and says they need to talk. When they go outside, the gentleman asks if he's tired of living, and Archon kneels and begs for forgiveness. Ben says that this should not happen again, and the man says that he remembers it. The aide informs him that he must tell them that His Highness the Crown Prince requests his presence. Ben, surprised, asks why. Archon says that he thinks he wants to know about yesterday's events. At this point, the gentleman was thinking about how he hadn't had time to meet with Circinia before he was summoned again. He didn't like it, but he had no choice, so he decided it was time to use the hidden cards. He figured that if he left at night, he could return early in the morning. Ben thinks that he will figure it out as quickly as possible and return, and believes that His Highness does not need to know about Circinia. The young gentleman asks his assistant if he knows who could pick up his letters. Archon reports that if he is talking about letters, then Verdict, the butler of the Shorebars family, saw his letters and said that he would send them himself. The assistant says that at that time, his master was the Grand Duke of Country, and he had no other choice but to turn a blind eye to it, and then says that he is very sorry. Bedrick served the Grand Duke, and therefore considers it obvious who took the letters. The master declares that from this moment on, Verdict will lose all authority in the Shorebars family and will throw him behind bars. May, surprised, asks the gentleman if he's sure everything's okay. He says he won't break anything and suggests not to worry, but the little girl wonders if he's ever worked in the kitchen. The girl asks if he knows how to make potato bread. He says that he can, because Circinia really likes it. May tells the lady that she knows she likes him because she doesn't eat anything else. Circinia tells her not to talk nonsense, and the girl explains that she's simply stating her preferences. May shows where the ingredients are, and he says that he will get everything. At this point, the main character thought she felt strange. She remembered what he once cooked for her. Ben asks if everything is okay, and the girl asks if she can help him. Circinia says that there is no need to help him because he knows what he is doing, and tells the little girl that she does not need to cook anything today. Ben informs the lady that he has to return to the capital for a short while. She asks if he is leaving right now, and then wonders if it would be better to leave in the morning. The guy explains that he must arrive by noon, and therefore leaves, now asking to wait for him. At this time, the main character does not understand why he asks him to wait, and she wonders if this is the same person who simply disappeared sometime in the past. Circinia tells him to be careful. He realizes she's being vague and thinks it seems difficult for her to say she'll wait for him. Then he tells her he's going to get ready. The girl thought that at such moments, it seems that he has not grown at all. And then she noticed a button on the floor and thinks that it must have come off Ben's clothes and thinks that she needs to tell him about it. When the lady entered the guy's room, she saw his bare shoulders, which were all covered in scars. He quickly put on his shirt and she asked what it was. Ben asks what she's talking about. Circinia says she's talking about the scars on her back and then asks what happened. The guy explains that he got them during his training, and therefore it's nothing special. She asks, surprised, what kind of training is it that leaves such scars? The young master says he got them during sword training. The lady knows this is a lie. Only an idiot would believe these scars were acquired during training. So she's sure he's lying, but she doesn't understand why. Ben touches her hand and then insists that everything is fine. At that moment, she thinks that even if she keeps asking, he won't tell her anything. Then he hands him the button and says it came off. The guy touched her hand, and she thought that perhaps the reason why Ben hadn't contacted her for 3 years was somehow connected with these scars. The crown prince asks the Lord if he knows what time it is. Ben says he came to him as soon as he could, but His Highness says he didn't warn him of his visit. Crown Prince Limipius Belfar asks why he showed up so early in the morning and then says that it doesn't matter and suggests coming more often because he's almost forgotten what Ben looks like. The gentleman asks to read this, and His Highness says he didn't even answer, then asks what it is. And when he reads it, he asks in surprise if it's true. Ben asks to be allowed to handle this. The Crown Prince asks Alex if this is true. The boy reports that he has already found the location of the base. Count Dexter not only owns a brothel within the Empire, but also engages in human trafficking. At this point, the Crown Prince reflected that Alex had never been interested in politics before and couldn't understand how he'd managed to conduct an investigation. His Majesty asks Alex what he wants. He replies that the Lord should strip Count Dexter of his title. Belfort claims that the Count is a vassal of the Duke of Kalash, and if the Duke finds out that he had a hand in this, he will not let it go so easily. The young gentleman claims he doesn't care. The prince considers that he senses his aura, as he never allowed others to see that side of him. Then he asks if it's all because of that girl he heard about, and then states that, judging by his reaction, he's right. His Majesty says he'd like to meet the girl he's fallen in love with. The young man turns to His Highness and informs him that he won't allow him to show any interest in her. Ben says he's leaving and hopes this matter will be resolved today. The young gentleman informs Circinia that he has returned. He asks the little girl what happened. She explains that she couldn't stop the lady because she understands her feelings, but she wanted to go with her because she is very worried about her. The main character says she doesn't want to leave things as they are. May says she wants to go with her, but the lady says she'll finish faster if she goes alone, so she suggests locking the door and waiting for her. At this time, the young gentleman thought that he had a bad feeling, and he was asking for everything to be okay with her. When Circinia came to the city, people were surprised and asked if this was the same witch. They were also surprised because she didn't even try to hide. Meanwhile, the main character simply walked on, keeping her head up, knowing she had done nothing wrong. She thought about how she needed to meet Gordon first and hear the truth from the one who had accused her. The girl realizes she'll have to go to Charles, who planned all of this. She grabs the man by the shirt and then asks where Gordon is. He replies that the man has already left. At this time, the lady thought that she had just found out where he lived and did not understand how she could now clear her name, and therefore understood that she would still have to meet with Charles. Circinia heard that he was locked in the same dungeon as she was before, and so she will meet him and find out the truth. The lady thought that she would never allow herself to be bullied again. Suddenly, the girl saw that a stone flew past her, and the men turned to her and told her to get out of their village. The man offers to look at her eyes, and then says that the crazy witch ran out of food and came for them. They also wonder if they can just burn her. At this time, the main character does not understand what she did wrong, because she understands that they want to destroy her. But she wonders how much longer she must endure this, and when it will stop. Circinia heard a voice asking if they all deserved to die, because they wanted her dead. And at that time, a fire began to burn near the people, and the voice told the girl to finish them all off, because she did not understand why she was hesitating. The voice says that if she kills everyone, no one will be able to ignore her. At this point, the protagonist thought she had a strange feeling. If this continues, she thinks she'll go crazy, just like when her seething rage was uncontrollable. The man fell to his knees and asked the lady to save him because he was wrong and begged her to spare his life. Circinia grabbed the man by the throat and thought that this was really the same person as recently because his manner of speech actions and the same aura emanating from him are completely different, and she thinks that they are bastards who see only what they want and hear what they want. The lady understands that she is the end of this long-awaited feeling, and she does not understand why she held back all this time, because she understands that she will turn this place into a sea of fire so that no one dares to neglect and humiliate her anymore. The man suggests that everyone run, but at this time, the main character does not understand what is happening and thinks that this is strange because she did not use her powers, but there is no energy in her body. Circinia thought that she just closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the voice, and does not understand why her hand is shaking all this time, because she feels a huge desire to finish someone off. The lady understands that this feeling is very similar to when she burned the warehouse in the fire, and this strong desire to burn everything and kill everyone. She does not understand how she can forget about it because she tried so hard not to succumb to her instincts. And besides, now the feeling is completely different from that time. The girl doesn't understand what's happening to her body. At this time, the man screams and asks how she dared to touch his son, and then says that he will not leave her alone and suggests that she get out of this village right now. Ben grabs the girl, saving her from the evil man's blow. He looks at her face and asks who did this to her. The young gentleman asks the girl to raise her face, and then takes a handkerchief and wipes away the red liquid and says that she needs treatment, and therefore they will go to the doctor immediately. The boy thought about how he should have protected her before she got hurt. He understands that if today, like 3 years ago, he had stayed with her, he would have protected her, and this would not have happened. Circinia says she wants to go home. He takes her in his arms and thinks he's angry with himself, then says he'll make those who dared to touch her pay. At this time, Count Dexter does not understand how the Archduke dares to exceed his authority on his territory, because he has the servants of the Duke himself, the Kylos. According to imperial territorial law, a feudal lord has power comparable to that of the emperor within his domains, and he considers this a clear sign of disrespect for him and the Duke of Kalos. A man came to Lord Duke Kalos, and he asked what happened. The count says that Archduke Schobarts invaded his lands with armed warriors, and then asks if this is not a clear abuse of power, and claims that this is a manifestation of disrespect towards him and the Duke. Kalos asks in surprise if this isn't the boy who just inherited the title, and then asks if the little tiger cub is afraid. He can't understand how he dared to disdain his authority. The count asks what the Duke will do. Kalos says to bring him. He also says that he didn't make him repeat it twice, because he will take responsibility. The Duke says that since he can't afford him the luxury of being caught with his own hands, he suggests gathering men and capturing him. At this point, he thought about what would happen if he were touched. Dexter reports that the Duke has given permission to capture the Archduke and suggests they head to the village immediately and bring him back. He understands that all that remains now is to wait for his loyal knights to bring him back. The knights say that they must arrest the accused, and Dexter, surprised, asks what they are doing and offers to take their hands off him, and then asks, how dare they, since they think they don't know who he is. The gentleman says it's an imperial order. He screams and demands that the decree be shown to the Duke immediately, but when he read it, he thought it couldn't be true and realized Duke Kalos had abandoned him. The man tells the old woman that if this continues, they will all die. And the woman says that they all saw what happened earlier and says that this is a witch lady. The gentleman objects and says that this woman is not a witch, but the devil himself. The guy offers to look at his neck because he believes the woman is actually planning to kill him and therefore believes it can't be left like that. At this point, the master was thinking about the problems they'd caused him by breaking in, and that his son had been in prison for 3 days already. He informed them that the Lord would soon give them an answer. The gentleman understands that they reported this to Count Dexter so long ago, and there is still no answer, and he believes that this woman appeared like a bolt from the blue. The man reports that they cannot act on their own because they all saw a dark red lion. At this time, the gentleman thought about the infamous Archduke Alexander, and he is not sure what kind of relationship he has with the witch, but he believes that it is unusual, and therefore understands that if they act carelessly, they will only suffer. The knights say they were sent by Count Dexter, and then ask where His Excellency is now. He says Count Dexter ordered His Excellency the Archduke to be brought, and then asks where he is. The Count thought that now everything was over, and he no longer had to worry about either the witch or the Archduke. The boy tells the old woman he brought tea, and the gentleman invites him in. He then asks about the witch, whether they should get rid of her completely. He also wonders if they shouldn't burn her at the stake. The woman says that if they leave her alive, she might cause trouble again. The man says that when the Archduke is captured, they should take advantage of the moment and set fire to her house. The village headman says it's a great idea, and then announces that they'll set fire to the witch's house at dawn today. He says he'll send a letter to Earl Dexter, and the fire will be attributed to a common fire. Hearing this, people support him and also say that they will do it and punish the witch. At this point, May looked at the mistress and said that if she had been able to talk her out of it, this wouldn't have happened. The master said that everything will be fine, and everything really will be fine because she definitely needs to wake up. Ben takes the girl's hand and then kisses her, while at the same time begging her in his thoughts so that she wakes up without problems. At that moment, he heard someone knocking on the door and asking if anyone lived in the house. He assumed the doctor had already arrived, and therefore decided it was probably time for him to leave. When the young gentleman opened the door, the knights turned to His Excellency and said that Count Dexter wished to meet with him, and then reported that His Excellency knew the reason. Ben offers to tell him that if he has anything to say, he should come in person. But the knight apologizes for his impertinence and then explains that this is also the Duke of Kalos's wish. The young gentleman claims that he will not repeat it twice, and then says that at midnight he himself will come to him. He looked angrily at the knights and did not apologize for disturbing him. Archien tells His Excellency that a letter has arrived from the palace. At this point, the girl turns to Cercinia and says that, thank God she's awake. The protagonist thinks that maybe if she hadn't left, as she told her, this wouldn't have happened. Then she hugs the girl and tells her not to cry, because she's okay. Ben entered the lady's room and asked if she was okay. The lady said she was fine, and then said she would rest for a bit. The man asks if she is really okay, because he is worried she answers that everything is fine, and at that time, she thinks that even when she closes her eyes, these terrible humiliations, bullying, and contemptuous looks do not disappear from her memory. The girl understands that she feels terrible, but she is okay, because these people always stand by her side and worry about her. The main character knows that the guy is always there for her when needed, and then thanks him for his concern. She believes he understands her so well without words that the 3-year separation becomes unimportant. Ben claims that he is worried about her and then touches her forehead and says that there is a scar there. The girl reports that the doctor said that he will soon disappear and suggests not to worry. And at this time, she realizes that so much pain has been caused to him, and she is afraid that one day he will not be able to bear it and will break. The guy says he's afraid she'll suddenly disappear one day, but the lady assures him that won't happen. He asks him not to put everything on her alone. Ben says that what she's going through is not normal for anyone, and then asks if he can be a little supportive to her. The Archduke says that he always wanted to become her sword and account, and therefore offers to use it as much as he wants, because he will always be on her side. Cercinia agrees and then thanks him. And at that time, she thought that it seemed to her that if she looked into his eyes now, she would tell him everything. The girl says that she was lonely, because she was alone, because she was the only one with an ability that frightened everyone around her, and therefore she needed him as a person who would be there, who was not afraid of this power, and would stay by her side. The protagonist realizes that Ben is now holding her hand just like he did 3 years ago. She asks why he's always like this. A guy tells a girl that everything will be fine. She thinks she doesn't understand why he always puts her first. The young gentleman claims he will do everything for this, and believes that when morning comes, everything will be fine. He then announces that he will remain by her side. Cercinia says he needs to go to bed too. He says he'll just watch her fall asleep and then leave, wishing her sweet dreams. Ben thought that, in order for her not to worry and to smile, he would get rid of all the interference and not leave a single one. The knights tell His Excellency that they will escort him to Count Dexter. Meanwhile, the men sitting in the bushes say he's gone and wants to take action. The boy wonders if they'll be okay after this, but the man insists everything will be fine, because he believes old age is the only one responsible. The man suggests pouring the wine because daylight is coming soon, but the man says he really can't do that and asks what to do if the witch gets angry, since they say she burned down the village. The man claims he's an idiot because he thinks it's impossible. If the witch is so brilliant, why did she let the people go alive? He thinks it's all a hoax, and then says all that's left to do now is set the place on fire. At that moment, Archon emerged from the bushes with his guards and ordered everyone arrested. The man, surprised, asked who they were. The Duke's assistant tells him to shut his mouth and then asks in front of whom he dares to raise his voice. The man says that the Archduke went to the capital and at that time thought that he clearly saw him leaving with the Count's men. At this time, the headman and his accomplices were tied up, and he does not understand how they uncovered their plan and believes that someone reported them. When the headman saw the boy, he realized that he could have been a spy sent by the Archduke and believed that everything was lost due to his carelessness. The headman reports that he was simply following orders and then asks to inform Count Dexter. The gentleman says that today the Count has been stripped of his title. Archon reports that His Majesty has temporarily granted His Excellency, the Archduke, all authority in this territory, and therefore he will judge their crimes. Hearing this, the man does not understand how this can be, and then asks how they are supposed to believe it. The gentleman shows him the order, and then suggests not even hoping that the Count will save them. He suggests looking closely at the imperial seal, and asserts that they will not get off easy for today's incident, since he understands that this is also a major arson. At this time, the Archduke asks where the guy named Gordon is. The man begs for mercy, as he was truly only doing what he was ordered to do. He says he was threatened to say that Cercinia started the warehouse fire. Ben says he unfairly accused the lady. Gordon asks if he has proof, and also asks how dare he arrest him without evidence. The gentleman suggests telling him, honestly, if he wants to save his life. The son of old age says that Gordon came up with everything himself, and he did not order him to do this. Ben says that it looks like he recognizes these things, because it is the brooch that was left in the burnt warehouse and the cloak that was found in his rooms. The gentleman asks if all this belongs to Charles Gordon, claims he always wore it. Then crying out says it's all his fault. The man asks how he dared accuse an innocent man and destroy their village. Gordon claims that they all suffered because of him and asks what he will do now, since he incited them all and deceived them. The gentleman asks if he has anything left to say. Charles asks why he should suffer because of some witch. Hearing this, Ben becomes angry and asks how he dares to blame her. Gordon looked at the wounded Charles and then begged His Excellency to show them mercy. The Duke said they were pleading with the wrong man, believing it was not he. They should beg for mercy for their crimes. The master informs them that he can immediately take their lives, but will only spare them because of Cercinia. He says that if they are going to beg for mercy and ask forgiveness for their sins, it is only from her. Ben claims that only she can control their lives. At this time, May will call the lady to wake up because it's very noisy outside. The girl says it seems people have gathered again. The main character thought about how she shouldn't have slept like that. After all, in this village, you can't let your guard down. She asks where Ben is, and the girl replies that he was already gone when she woke up. Cercinia wondered where he had gone, and thought that something had happened again, just like last time. May asks the lady if she's okay. Cercinia assures her that everything is fine, and asks the girl not to cry. The lady thought about Ben silently disappearing again, and then suggested the little girl stay inside the house. May asked the lady to simply run away, but the lady asked her not to go out and to trust her. At this point, the main character thought that if they ran away again, now something similar would happen again. And even if they did, May would definitely be worried about the new place, and they would spend every day in tension. Lady realizes that she doesn't want to hurt May anymore, and believes that she needs to put an end to this in order to move on. Cercinia asks what's going on. Ben reports that Gordon confessed to everything. Hearing this, the man apologizes to the lady, and then explains that Charles ordered him to, so he couldn't do anything. Hearing this, the main character approaches Charles and grabs him by the throat, saying that it was him after all. The village chief's son begs for mercy, because he admits he's guilty of everything. The girl asks how he dares ask her to save his life. And then she realizes that memories of things she didn't do are surfacing so clearly. The man says they thought she was a witch who set fire to the warehouse, so they planned to set fire to her house that night. They say they misunderstood, apologize, and ask for generosity. Cercinia objects and says that it is up to her to show generosity, and then states that there is no forgiveness for them. The man says that he just apologized, and the lady says that she does not accept his apology, and then says that if he really wants to atone for his guilt, he must die. When the lady took the sword and looked at Charles, she asked in surprise if he had wet himself and said that he was coming, and that he was a complete idiot because he had been bragging so much and was now shaking all over. She told him not to let her see him again, because next time she would definitely finish him off. Ben asked the girl if that's enough. She says this scoundrel isn't worth getting her hands dirty with, and she doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. The Archduke says that everything will be done according to her wishes. He orders the guards to remove these men and tells the lady that she will never see them again, as they will pay for their sins all their lives. Cercinia says that the village will soon become noisy and then thanks him. Ben says he's sorry, he couldn't help her sooners. The lady approaches the girl and apologizes for the fact that she too suffered. Because of her, May assures the lady that it's not her fault, believing it's all because of those people. The young gentleman says that if they haven't yet decided where to go, he asks if they would like to go with him to the capital. Ben argues that they can remain in the capital while they consider their next destination. He believes they could stay in the capital permanently, which is of course his preferred option. He then says that he'd be happy with whatever destination Cercinia chooses. Hearing this, May asks if they can go to the capital, because she has never been there, and therefore she is curious. At this time, the main character thought that she had decided that she would not stay in the capital, but as Ben said, rather than leave inconveniently, it would be nice to stay in the capital for a while they decide where to go next. The lady believes this is only temporary, and everything will be fine since she's been quietly hiding for 3 years, and understands that the situation is very different from the original plot. She agrees with them. Cercinia reflects on the fact that he hasn't yet told her about the scars on his back or what he's been doing for the past 3 years. She's curious about Ben's past, which wasn't explored in the original storyline. May invites the lady to look out the window because she thinks it's amazing. The lady says it really is stunning, and the gentleman asks if they like it. Cercinia says that as expected, the capital is different. Ben reports that they have arrived at the Schobarts estate and suggests they descend carefully. The main character asks if this is his house, and also inquires whether it's the Imperial Palace. May, surprised, says that the mansion does indeed look royal. Ben tells the lady that it is Merchin the butler, and then says that the two of them will be staying for some time, and therefore will try to make their interruption convenient. The Archduke tells the girl she must be tired, so he shows her to her room. A few minutes later they arrive, and the young man says it was rushed, so it might be a bit messy. Cercinia was surprised, because she didn't understand whether this room could be called untidy. The gentleman says that May's room is next to hers, and his room is right across the hall. He invites her to make herself at home. Meanwhile, the girl thinks he seemed to have emphasized the word opposite on purpose. The lady asks if she should now call him Herr Archduke, since she understands that this is the Archduke's estate. He suggests calling him Ben, as always, and she asks surprised if that's okay. The gentleman explains that of course she can, since he likes that name much better. Then he says that if she needs anything, she can ask at any time. He says he'll be happy if she asks him for anything. When the lady was alone, she lay down on the bed and thought about how tired she was. She also realized that the bed was so comfortable that she wanted to steal it and wondered how much it cost. The main character realizes that apparently, because of the long-awaited peace, she is for some reason feeling sleepy. A maid comes into the lady's room and says that from this day on, she will serve her, and then says that her name is Bernie. Hearing this, the mistress thought the name was familiar, and she couldn't remember where she'd heard it. She looked at the maid and thought that she had ordinary chestnut hair and dark brown eyes. Not a luxurious, but a neat beauty. The lady thinks that she looks soft and calm, but exudes a strange noble aura, and she seems to be wearing a dress, although it is just a maid's uniforms. Cercilia reflects on the fact that this is so much so that it creates the illusion that she should have a crown on her head. Suddenly, she remembered that she knew this girl because in the illustrations, she was sitting in the place of the crown prince's wife and wearing a tiara, and the main character of the original story, Bern, was smiling nobly. The aristocrats ask His Majesty whether he was too hasty in his decision regarding Count Dexter. They wonder how he can transfer control of the territory to Archduke Schobarts. The gentleman says that he has only recently recovered from an illness, and then asks why he trusts such an archduke with power. The prince says that this is only a temporary power, and after everything is organized, they can discuss it again. The emperor states that the crown prince is right, and then asks if they have any objections to his punishment. The gentlemen tell his majesty that they do not. The emperor then suggests they call it a day. Belfort says that we can finally breathe a sigh of relief. The aide asks his majesty if he's finished for the day. He says the old men are chatting more and more, because he thinks they have nothing better to do. The assistant reports that the archduke has returned to the capital. The prince asks when he replies that it was just a few hours ago, and then reports that he returned to the estate with some woman. His majesty was surprised when he heard this, and then said that he finally brought her. And at that time, he thought that this was definitely the woman he was so desperately trying to find. The aide tells His Highness that his office is on the wrong side. He says he knows because he's now heading to the Archduke's estate. The man asks where he's going, realizing they have a ton of work to do. The prince replies he'll only be gone for a short while. The assistant insists he can't, then says he can leave after he's finished. Belfort thought that he needed to finish his business quickly in order to see her. Byrne asks the lady if she's okay, and also inquires if she's feeling unwell. At this point, the protagonist realizes she's asleep, realizing the novel didn't mention Byrne working at the Archduke's estate. The girl understands that it only described how she worked hard to pay off her father's debts and her mother's medicine. The maid says that she will call the master and the doctor. Cercinia doesn't know what might happen if she bonds with her, and knows she doesn't want to die like in the original story. And she thinks the first thing she needs to do is escape. At this time, Ben comes into the room and asks if she is unwell, and also asks why she is holding a suitcase with things and where she is going. The guy asks if she's going to disappear without telling him. She objects, saying it's a misunderstanding, and asks him to let go of her hand. The Archduke thought that Cercinia had suddenly decided to leave, to take revenge on him for leaving her alone for 3 years, and therefore he considered this truly excellent revenge. However, he knew he could never let her go. The guy thought that he wanted to keep her next to him, even if he had to tie her up and lock her up, so that he wouldn't shake with fear, worrying that someday she would leave, so that only he could have her and look at her. At this time, the lady touches his face and claims that she did not intend to leave him because she wants to stay with him. The main character thought that for a moment she was going to run away because of Byrne, but she did not think about Ben. The guy asks if it's true and then tells her she better be honest. He thinks he's the one who left the bruise on her thin wrist, and he realizes that if he had applied more force, he could have broken it. The Archduke understands that he is frightened by his feelings and wrong greed, and he does not understand whether this is normal, because in fact he thinks about her like this. The maid says that she thinks that the mistress is already fine, and therefore she will leave, and then says that if she is needed, then she can call her at any time. Cercinia tells the boy that it's better to assign Berna another job. He asks what the maid did wrong. The lady explains that she is uncomfortable with someone serving her because she is used to being alone and does not need another servant, and then asks if he will fulfill her request. After this, 2 days passed, during which time the main character was never able to see Ben, because either he was busy with work or did not return to the estate at all. Instead, the doctor on the master's orders came every day to tend to the wound on her forehead. The protagonist believes that if he was so concerned, he would have come himself. May thinks it would be nice if they could live here forever. The lady says it's not their home, and so they'll have to leave soon. The girl asks if she can't live here if she marries the Archduke. Cercinia tells her not to talk nonsense, as she considers Ben and she like brother and sister. At this time, the main character thought that it would be strange to call them brother and sister, and then said that she would go out for a short while to get some air. The girl thought that she simply liked being with Ben, and when she returned home, she liked that, instead of a cold and empty place, Ben greeted her with warmth. Cercinia reflects on how she liked it so much, and thought it was enough, but she doesn't understand what to call such a relationship. Suddenly, the protagonist overheard a conversation between the men and Byrne. She realizes how difficult it is to confront the enemy alone. The man asks the maid if she is rejecting him too much, and then says that they heard that she was wagging her tail at James. Byrne claims that she said that this is not so. He asks if she wants money, and also wonders if 100 shillings is enough, because he thinks that this is even too generous. The maid punches the man and tells him to try it if he wants her to cut him off. At this time, the main character does not understand what is happening because she knows that Byrne in the original plot always had such a character, even though she was a stubborn character. The man gets up to hit the maid and say that she is a crazy girl. Circinia grabs the man, stopping him. The lady says that 3 men are holding one girl, and she considers it shameful and incredibly vile. The young man objects and says that's not true, as the lady only saw part of it, and it seems they misunderstood something. He smiles and says that her origins are unknown, so perhaps she's unaware that aristocratic families often teach their maids a lesson this way. The man says that it is their duty because they only wanted to check whether those scandalous rumors were true. Circinia asks, because they have many responsibilities, they decided to bully one girl. The servant, surprised, asks why she calls it a publication and also inquires what she's saying. He explains that they did it simply to ensure that nothing could tarnish His Excellency's reputation. The lady grabs him by the shoulders and asks who he is to talk about him, and offers to tell him again what she doesn't know. The man asks to stop, and then says that he simply misspoke, and asks the lady for forgiveness. Circinia asks Byrne what they will do with them. Hearing this, the maid, surprised, asks what she's talking about. The lady explains what's going on with them, and then asks what they should do. She says that if Byrne wants to punch them in the nose, then he can do it because she'll say she finished them off. Bernie thanks him for his concern. The lady asks the men their names. They reply, Kyle, Jonathan, and Kevin. The lady suggests they go and get going. The main character thought that Kyle, Jonathan, and Kevin were from rumors and needed a favorite way to drive these 4 out of the estate. Byrne says she'll go too and thanks the lady. But the lady suggests they stay and asks why she just let them go, knowing that things had recently even come to blows. However, the girl remained silent, and the lady said that if she did not want to talk, then there was no need, and apologized, because she felt that she had wasted her time. Byrne explains that it's not that simple, since she'll have to see them even if they're kicked out of the estate. She understands it won't make any difference, since their friends will continue to work here. Circinia reflects that the matter will not end with the elimination of these 4, and that today's incident will repeat itself. The maid says that she needs to earn money for her mother's medicine and pay off her father's debt, and to do this, she must work here, even if it is hard for her. Then she can only endure it and begins to cry. The lady gave her a handkerchief and then thought about what she'd said about her mother's medicine. The lady realized that in the original story, Byrne was forced to buy her mother's medicine because Circinia had burned her mother's face. The burns were so severe that without treatment she would thrash about in agony. But after she inhabited Circinia's body, the plot was supposed to change. The main character asks what her mother is sick with, and at that time, she thinks that maybe she has another illness. The maid replies that she has severe burns and that she can only live if she uses medications for the rest of her life. Hearing this, the lady wondered if she really had been burned, just like in the original. Then she asked why her mother was in such a state and how it had happened. Byrne says that she doesn't know this because she heard it from home once, and when she returned, her mother was lying unconscious and already severely burned. The maid says that the doctor also said that it was very strange because there was no fire in the house, but the mother says that she doesn't remember what happened then. The maid noticed her mistress had become ill and then asked if she was all right. Circinia explained that she was only slightly dizzy and then wondered if it meant she wasn't suffering from a chronic illness, but rather burns. The main character believes that she certainly didn't cause harm like Circinia in the original, and therefore believes that Bernie's mother must be fine. She doesn't understand why events unfold the same way as in the original, and why they haven't changed. The maid offers the lady a hand to lean on. The mistress asks when she started working, and the maid replies that it hasn't even been 2 weeks. Circinia reflects on the time when Byrne began to earn money for her mother's medicine. In the original, Byrne escaped her slave status and began working in late autumn, and she knows that now is precisely that period. The maid tells the lady that her complexion is unhealthy and therefore suggests that she rest, and then says that she will take her to her room. The maid asks if she should call a doctor, but Madame says everything is fine, knowing she was just feeling a little dizzy. Byrne says that if she is really okay, then he will make the bed so that she can lie down. Circinia asks if she wants to be near her again. Hearing this, the maid, surprised, asks if she's talking about her job as a maid, and then reminds her that she said she felt uncomfortable. The lady apologizes and then explains that it turned out to be quite difficult for her to cope alone and asks if she will be able to help her again. Barn is the novel's main character. She's definitely at the center of all the action. And while she didn't live the same life as in the original, Burn's mother still suffered burns. The main character understands that she must check whether everything is really happening the same as in the original, or whether it is just a coincidence. And then she says that she will convey the change in her duties, and therefore suggests not to worry. The maid says she agrees. Madame says she's counting on her. Then, at that moment, it occurred to her that she was simply begging for this to be the right choice. Meanwhile, in the villa of the Archduke Schobart's family, an assistant approaches His Excellency and says that 2 days have already passed, and then asks, how about returning to the estate, or at least getting some proper rest in bed? Ben replies that everything is fine, and then asks how Cercinia's wounds are. The man explains that the doctor told him that if he uses the ointment constantly, scars will almost disappear. He says he understands, and then says he can go. The Archduke reflects that he is glad that she is recovering, and he would like to personally check it, but he is afraid that he will lose his mind again and will not be careful with her. Archon tells the master that he is worried that he will exhaust his body because he assumes that perhaps something happened to him with the lady. The young gentleman says that he will go to inspect the territory tomorrow, and therefore suggests that they go get ready immediately. Ben realizes that he is keeping his distance so as not to hurt her, and considers it a disgusting and terrible desire to imprison her in his arms, but he realizes that he misses her. Cercinia and May went for a stroll through the capital's central market. The girl tells the lady that it's very beautiful there. The mistress turns to the maid and says, she can look around too if she wants, since it's time for a rest. Fabian Street is home to goods from every region of the country, and the main character understands that it's no exaggeration to say that this is an important trading point. Wooden products made in the village of Mullen, where they lived briefly with Ben, were also mainly supplied here. Cercinia tells the girl she'll fall if she keeps running around like that. May assures her she's fine and invites Madame to look at the jewelry. The lady asks Byrne if this is her first time on Fabian Street. She replies that it is indeed her first time. The lady asks if she hadn't lived in the capital before. The maid explains that she had to earn money at home since childhood, so she did not go outside often. Hearing this, the main character doesn't understand why she has such a bitter past, and then apologizes, believing she shouldn't have asked, but the maid assures her that everything is fine, as she really enjoys looking around now. Cercinia says that if this is the case, they will have a lot of fun. And at that time, she looked at the girls and thought that she never imagined that they would be so happy, just like little children. The main character saw a man who told the lady that it was a very precious and rare stone. He claimed that it was a special product that was not easy to acquire. The seller offers to look at this clear red glitter and claims that it is opaque to the point that his hand cannot be seen, and then asks if this is true. The man says that this confirms the authenticity of the gemstone and believes that if it were in a jewelry store, it would sell for 5 million shillings. Meanwhile, the lady was thinking that at first glance it seemed to sparkle beautifully. The salesman said she was lucky to have found it in a stall, and that's why he was only asking for 2 millions. The main character watching this seller thought that she could not be fooled. She comes up and asks if this spinel is a bloody rose, and then says that for him, the more transparent the stone, the higher the value. Cercinia insists that this stone is not only opaque, but even cloudy, and she believes jewelers won't even take on such a specimen. Hearing this, the man exclaims and asks what she knows, since he's a gem appraiser. The woman asks if this lady's words are true. The salesman assures her that they are not, as he believes the woman is talking nonsense. The woman says the owner denies everything, and then asks the lady what she thinks. The woman says that if she doesn't believe her, she can go to a few jewelry stores nearby, and then she'll understand that the item is not for sale. The lady claims this stone is the worst of the worst, and therefore doubts it can fetch even a single shilling. The seller, exclaiming, asks who she is to interfere. The woman says she won't buy such a suspicious item. He insists he was unfairly accused, and the woman asks if they'll call security and check it together. He apologizes and says no. The woman tells the lady that she could have passed by, but someone helped her, and so she thanks her and then asks her name. At this time, the main character thought that she should not reveal the name, because the name Circinia had already become the subject of rumors, and then said that she needed to go. The lady looked after the girl and thought that she was very interesting, and she hoped that they would meet again someday. May says she really likes the capital, and Byrne says she had a lot of fun. Lady asks if they enjoyed it. The little girl says there are many sights there. The cafes are very beautiful, and the desserts are also the best. At this point, the main character thought about bringing them more often. Byrne says that she doesn't think she has seen His Excellency at the estate lately, and reports that she heard that he was staying at a small mansion used as a warehouse. The maid says that she is not sure, but they say that Mr. Archon brings him documents there every morning, and then asks the lady what happened to her with His Excellency. Circinia wonders what could have happened. She asks why the majestic Archduke abandoned her and remains there. The lady replies that she doesn't know either, because she doesn't understand how she could know. The girl thought that after that day, he disappeared, as if avoiding her. Byrne asks in surprise if this means that the lady also doesn't know, since she thought that, since they were in love, she would definitely know. May was surprised and wondered how they had managed to progress so much. Circinia insisted that couldn't be true. Byrne asks if this is true, and then says that she thought she and the Archduke were definitely in a relationship. She then apologizes, believing she said too much. The lady says everything is fine, then asks her to lift her head and ask who told her that. She replies that everyone was talking about it, and that's why she thought so too. The lady asks in surprise who all this is, and the girl replies that most of the people are in the estate. Circinia says that she will go out onto the terrace for a short while and invites them to stay inside, and says that if they want something else, they can order. Byrne was upset because she'd said too much and ruined their walk. The girl reassured her, believing that Mrs. No was the kind of person who would be angry about something like that. The maid says she really didn't know and truly thought they were lovers. May reassures her and says everything is fine, offering her something sweet because she thinks it will improve her mood. Byrne thinks that it is her own fault for believing people's words, but on the day when they said that Lady Circinia was ill, the image of the pale master who dropped everything and ran away, and like no one else looked like a person who would worry about his beloved. At this point, the main character thought about what it meant that she was the only one who didn't know about these rumors. She realized that it would be impossible to spend every day justifying and denying these rumors. The lady understands that this could, however, harm the girl who will become his future lover. She thought about how she didn't even know her own future now, and didn't understand whether she should even worry about his future lover. Circinia heard the lady's conversation and thought that she had come to a secluded place on purpose, and thought that she needed to move. The lady asks if her friend has heard that the Archduke has fully recovered, but since he was ill for a long time, it is impossible to say for sure. Hearing this, the protagonist reflected on the fact that there was only one Archduke Shobars in the Empire. She wondered if his illness was connected to the scars on his back. The woman says he's been bedridden since he was a child, so it wouldn't be strange if he fainted again. Her interlocutor says she thought he wouldn't be able to get up again. Circinia doesn't understand what these women are talking about. The woman says she thought he wouldn't be able to get up again because they always said he didn't have long to live. The girl thought that this couldn't be true because Ben hadn't lain in bed since childhood. The woman continues to say that when she saw him healthy at the banquet in honor of His Majesty's birthday, she was extremely surprised because that day she met him for the first time, and he looked so much like the former Archduke Schobarts. Circinia wondered if they were talking about the guy she knew. She recalled that Ben had previously told her that as a child he lived with his mother, but she died and he lived as a slave for several years. Ben, who lived with her and then disappeared without a trace, 3 years later reappeared and became an archduke. She believes that perhaps the Count's family fabricated his past and spread rumors because they believe the title of archduke descended from slaves is unbecoming. The protagonist doesn't understand why the Archduke's originally legitimate son would leave the Count's wealthy family and live with them instead of his mother. She realizes there are too many questions. The lady asks if the rumors are true about a woman arriving at the Archduke's residence. The lady replies that they say he even personally escorted her and insisted on his maids assisting her, and that he treats her just like a bride. The woman wondered who they were from and what family they were from. Meanwhile, the girl couldn't understand whether they were talking about her. The lady reports that there is even a rumor that she is a commoner, and therefore wants to see this woman at least once. Circinia quickly leaves, because she thinks that at this rate they will find out her appearance. The lady asks how Lady Aronia is. Her friend says she was so clearly showing her attraction to the Archduke. And at this time, the main character thought that she needed to leave quickly before they recognized her. When the lady came to the girls, she apologized and then asked how long they had been waiting for her. May assured them it hadn't been long, and then asked how she liked the terrace. The lady replies that it's wide and beautifully decorated, and then says that if she's interested, she can take a look. The little girl says that she'll go and see for herself then. At this time, the lady noticed that Bern looked depressed, but hoped that they would talk and everything would be resolved. The lady says that she wants to ask the maid something, and then asks if the Archduke was ill in childhood. The girl says that as far as she knows, he was weak from birth, so he almost never appeared in high society. Circinia, hearing this, realized that no one had seen Ben in high society. She thought she might have been right about his illness being a lie, invented to justify the length of his absence. The lady asks if there is anyone on the estate who worked there when the Archduke was little. Bern says that this is not certain, but the lady assures that everything is fine, and if she knows anything, she asks that she be told. The maid reports that 6 months ago, when the Archduke recovered from his illness, she heard that all the maids working at the estate were replaced at once. Almost simultaneously, everyone was fired, and new maids were hired. Hearing this, the main character assumes that the maids were replaced, but she is interested in why this happened 6 months ago, because Ben himself said that he went to the Count's family 3 years ago. The girl believes that if they wanted to hide his past, they should have replaced the servants at that time. She finds it odd, given that he spent 2 years training to be an heir secretly from the servants, and she suspects he may have lied to her. Circinia asks how long the butler has been working there. She replies that the butler also started recently, and says that the previous butler, Bedrick, was a servant to His Excellency and resigned due to deteriorating health. The main character understands that there is not a single person in the estate who has been working there for a long time, but she believes that Mr. Archon has been working in the estate longer than anyone else. The girl thought that, first of all, she needed to meet him, and then she said that the sun was already setting and asked the girls if they would go already. At this time, a man was watching the lady with red hair and thought that he missed her. A few days later at the Schobarts estate, the main character reflected on how after her walk, she had been struggling to find even the smallest clues related to Ben. The lady diligently studied the servants' information, but as Bern had said, there was no one working here at the time. She thought that now only Archon remained. Circinia realizes that after Ben disappeared from the estate, it's impossible to meet him, either as a week has already passed. According to the butler, Ben and Archon went out together to explore the grounds. The Archduke says he'll be exploring the grounds before lunch and making a quick visit to the Imperial Palace afterward. He asks about joining them for dinner, as he won't be late. The main character thought that before Ben would have told her his schedule in detail, and she wondered if he was really so busy that he couldn't come home. The lady is interested in whether he is eating well, and also when he is going to return. The girl thought he could at least show his face for a moment and believes he doesn't even think anyone cares about him. She doesn't understand why he thinks that way, since she's not his wife, and he doesn't love her, and he's not obligated to report to her every day. Circinia didn't understand what right she had to be upset, and thought she'd completely lost her mind. She thought about how autumn had arrived, and how it had gotten cooler. The main character reflects on the fact that if everything proceeds as in the original plot, then an episode of a meeting between Bern and the Crown Prince will soon appear. In the original story, the two met when Bern was in danger and the prince was visiting the capital. She believes this is a standard method in romance. At this point, Mrs. Aronia asks when the Archduke will return. The butler explains that, unfortunately, he cannot give an exact time. She says that the Count also wishes to meet him. The butler says that he will convey to His Excellency that the Counts of Blenjoin wish to meet with him. Circinia wondered who this elegant beauty was, as she looked noble and well-bred. She assumed she was a typical aristocratic lady with a good upbringing. The lady wondered why she was looking at her so intently. Aronia tells the butler that she's counting on him, and therefore deviating. He wishes her well. The servant greeted the lady. She asked who it was. He said it was Lady Aronia Blenjuan, the Count's only daughter, and then announced that she might one day become His Excellency's bride. Mirchin says he still has business to attend to, and therefore asks permission to take his leave. Lady doesn't understand why he's acting this way, and thinks he's trying to imply that a woman like Lady Aronia is more suited to Ben. Cercinia reflects on the fact that she's only been at his estate for a little over a week, which doesn't mean she's living there now. She thinks that no one except Ben is welcome. After all, she's a guest on this estate, a mere stranger. The girl thought that if it weren't for Ben, she would definitely be despised. She ponders whether perhaps she should have lived peacefully alone after all. The lady asks Bern what happened. She says the lady never returned, and she thought she might have gotten lost. Cercinia asks if she would like to have tea in the garden today. At this time, Archon tells His Excellency that the Harvest Festival will soon take place. He asks when, and the assistant replies that in 4 days. Harvest Festival is a festival and ceremony expressing gratitude for this year's harvest and praying for a bountiful next year. Although from the capital's point of view, this is a small-scale event for people in the provinces, it is a big event. The Archduke offers to convey that if anything is needed for the holiday, he will help in any way he can. The young master looked at the people and thought that they must be uncomfortable being in the field of view of the lord of the territory, and he thought that they should hide. Ben reflects on how he disappeared from her circle for Cercinia's sake, and how 10 days have passed. He realizes that the longer he doesn't see her, the more he misses her. The young gentleman reflected on how he'd put down his pen many times because her face had popped into his head while he was working, and even if he didn't want to think about her, it was beyond his control. He felt like the days were flying by, just like those summer days of yore. The Archduke thought that he missed her very much and wanted to see her sooner. He thought that if he didn't see her right now, he wouldn't be able to bear it. Archon informs His Excellency that he has prepared a place to stay. The master says he will return first and quickly mounts his horse and rides off. The butler asks the gentleman if he's back and if he'd like a bath. Ben thanks him and declines. The young gentleman thought that Cercinia must be sleeping now, and he would just look at her for a bit and leave. When the guy opened the door, he saw an empty bed and thought that she had disappeared again. Ben looked around and saw a sleeping girl standing in the hallway. He thought it was because she was sleepwalking, but when he touched her, he felt warmth and realized it was the real Cercinia's temperature. The young gentleman says he thought she'd vanished again without a word, that she'd gotten scared of him and eventually left. He claims he's overjoyed that wasn't the case, and then carries the girl to the bed. Ben realizes that she looks the same as when he saw her last time, and she still has an incredibly beautiful and radiant face, and she is very charming, and it is impossible not to love her. The guy doesn't understand if he can stay with her. At this time, the main character thought that she was hearing a sad voice coming from somewhere unknown, and her consciousness was foggy, but she clearly heard this voice. The Archduke says he is afraid he will hurt her. Cercinia opened her eyes and saw the young gentleman, thinking that this couldn't be true. Then she asked if he had been avoiding her because of this. Ben replies that he's not sure he won't hurt her. She argues that he shouldn't protect her because he understands she's not made of glass. The guy says that this is not what he meant and explains that he is simply afraid that his desires might scare her and hurt her. The girl calms him down and says that he has no reason to hurt her, but he claims that he is sure of this because he understands that he cannot contain his ever-growing desire, because he desires her so much that he cannot control himself. The man thought that if he told her about his true desire to keep her, even if he had to break her wings, he did not know how she would react, and thought that she might hate him or feel disappointed. Cercinia claims that he is not the kind of person who can hurt her since no one can even touch her yet, and then asks if he has forgotten about her abilities. The girl offers to look at it and then asks him if he thinks it's easy to break. Then she says she understands what he's worried about. The main character thought that he definitely avoided her because he was worried. But from the moment at the pier, he said with a wide smile that he wanted to be with her. And since he believed that she had always been his salvation, he gave her the opportunity to live among people even with such power. Cercinia says that she knows that he would never harm her, but assumes that if something like this were to happen, she would not blame him for it, because she believes that she is not the kind of person who can easily get hurt. The lady suggests not to be afraid of what has not yet happened. The boy thought that these were foolish thoughts, because Circinia is someone who can defend herself and get back on her feet after enduring hardships. He understands that she's not someone he can grab and break. The protagonist asks if he remembers what he told her at the pier. Then she reminds him that she definitely gave him a chance, but he was the one who said he'd be with her. Then she asks if it makes sense that he's avoiding her now. Ben says that he also wants to express his desire. She asks what his desire is, and then suggests that he just say it since she believes that everyone has their own desires. At this time, the guy realized that her affectionate answer was not like her, because he does not understand how he cannot desire her. And then he says that he likes her very much. Circinia tells him that she treats him well too. He says it's late at night, and he doesn't want to interrupt her sweet sleep. At this point, Ben thought about how the confession that had escaped him hung in the air, but he wouldn't rush into expressing his sincere feelings. He believed it would be enough for him if she someday learned of her true feelings. The gentleman says that if she doesn't mind, he suggests having breakfast together tomorrow. The girl agrees, and he says that they'll see each other in the morning. When the guy leaves, the main character reflects on how it happened so suddenly, and how she can't even look him in the eye. So she decides she needs to pull herself together. At this point, the man informs the woman that he's already arrived and apologizes for being late, asking if anything happened. She says she saw it, and he asks what she's talking about. The woman says Circinia has everything too perfect and believes it's unacceptable and should be taken away. The lady says she must remind her of her place. The next morning, the main character does not want to get tired and says that she is very sleepy and asks to let her sleep more. And as a result, she was not able to have breakfast with Ben. Circinia realizes she's avoiding him and believes this isn't the answer, but she still lacks the courage to meet him. She wonders how long she's been attracted to him. The lady reflects on how, looking back, she realizes that in their shared memories, Ben always gave her the most tender smile. She wonders if she truly didn't notice his feelings. The girl remembers that he told her countless times that he wanted to be with her, and she does not understand how she could not know, because even after he became Archduke, he tried for her sake, and she simply pretended not to notice it for her own convenience. The main character believes that he always expressed his feelings, and she ignored him because she was afraid that their relationship would change, and believes that it is all useless, because in any case, now is not the time to play at love. Circinia knows that the plot has already started to move forward, and the tension is growing every day, and she does not have time to express her feelings to anyone, and thinks that she must refuse him. The girl heard the gentleman's voice, asking if he could come in. She protested, screaming, and he asked if she was feeling unwell. The lady says she is fine. Ben says he needs to tell her something and can talk about it outside the door. The main character offers to wait, then quickly runs to the bathroom and washes her face. She also applies makeup. The girl looked at herself in the mirror and didn't understand what she was doing because she knew she was about to refuse him. She didn't know why she was worried about looking bad, because she thought it was enough that she didn't smell bad and her face was clean. When Circinia opened the door, she saw the guy and didn't understand why he was so handsome today. Ben mentions that the Harvest Festival is in 3 days and then announces that he wants to go with her. He says he's asking her out on a date and that if it's too much trouble for her, she can safely decline. The lady says she'll think about it, and he says he'll go then, and turns around and leaves. The girl grabs his hand and says they'll go to the Harvest Festival together. Circinia reflects on how she decided to refuse him and doesn't understand why she grabbed his hand. However, she felt that if she didn't take that hand, Ben would go somewhere very far away, and she realizes that she too wants to indulge her desires. The Archduke says he is very pleased. The girls suggest the mistress get up quickly as they think it's not time to sleep. She asks what's going on so early in the morning. May says to get ready, we need to start moving now. And the maid says she'll help too. At this time, the main character thought that she shouldn't have said that she would go to the festival with Ben, and realized that it was a good thing she didn't say anything about the confession. The lady suggests doing the usual as always, but the girls object, saying it's a date and of course they need to dress up. May asks the lady what will happen if she goes with the Archduke to the Harvest Festival he is hosting, Byrne claims that the locals will keep an eye on them, wondering who the girl next to the Archduke is. The maid says that many people will be looking at her, so she needs to at least dress up a bit. Hearing this, the lady thinks she's right, and then agrees, telling them to dress her up, but not too much. May looks at the lady in surprise and says that, as expected, she is very beautiful. Byrne delightedly declares that she is incredibly beautiful and reports that His Excellency conveyed that he will be waiting for her at the entrance. When Cercinia saw the gentleman, she wondered if he was staring at her too much because he thought she was uncomfortable and needed to quickly go down the stairs. Suddenly, the girl twisted her ankle, and at that moment, the gentleman ran up to her and grabbed her. Ben asks if she's okay. The lady assures her that she is fine. The Archduke looks at her and tells her that she is beautiful, then says that they will be late and suggests they hurry. The servant informs His Excellency that they have arrived in the village. Cercinia thought that, today, she would definitely have to refuse him. But now she would like to forget about the approaching end for a while and enjoy this festival. The main character was surprised because everything there was much more energetic and large-scale than she thought. Ben gives the girl a candy and says it's fruit and syrup. He explains that the fruit is dipped in syrup on the outside and that this type of candy is made only in this village, so he thinks she'll like it. The lady took the candy and thanked it, and when she tasted it, she said that it was very tasty, and at that time she thought that it was very sweet and did not understand how it was possible to be so sweet. Ben touches her lips and tells her they're dirty. She doesn't understand why her lips feel hot after his touch. The Archduke thought the finger that touched her was burning hot and asked if she was cold. She replied that she was fine, but he said it was chilly today and took off his jacket, handing it to her. Cercinia tells him to put it on himself, and then asks what he'll do if he gets sick. He replies that he's fine. The young gentleman announces that a large bonfire will be lit in the very center of the village square, and a sacrifice will be made to the nobles. This is gratitude for this year's harvest and a prayer for the coming year. Ben says that if she doesn't mind, he suggests they look at the victim together and then go back. The main character understands that evening will come and agrees. Cercinia suggests looking at these bracelets because she thinks the colors are very pretty. The gentleman says that if she likes them, she can buy them and offers her a choice. The saleswoman says that the two of them chose colors that match each other and then says that they are perfect for Togo to give to each other. The girl suggests that they do just that and then tells him to take one for himself. She says she likes both and therefore suggests he choose the one he likes. The young gentleman says that then he will take the red one. At this time, the prince asks why Alik is not there, and then says that it is all because of him. The crown prince says that he barely finished all the work, and the two of them just now left for the harvest festival. And as luck would have it, it was today. The assistant asks if he'll return to the palace immediately, but the gentleman says he struggled so much to get out for this walk that he can't just leave. Belfort reports that he will at least go to Fabian Street. After some time, His Majesty, when he saw the rose, thought that it was artful, and that it had only been sent from the village of Briand yesterday, and then he said to Eric that he would buy it. The assistant, surprised, asks if he has room to put it. He says they'll have to book another table then. Suddenly, the gentleman saw men surrounding the girl. They said she was apparently hoping for Cercinia, and therefore believed she needed to wake up as she was acting this way because she had trusted a woman who appeared out of nowhere. Byrne objects and tells them not to insult the lady. The man asks if that's an insult. And at this time, the prince thought that he had found them and understood where the sounds were coming from. The guy suggests Byrne analyze the situation as they believe she has no reliable support here. He reminds her that last time they had to let her go, but not today. Louis asks the brat if she knows he's been suffering for days because of her. The girl says that this time she'll make sure his bruises never heal, and then punches him. The man screams and tells them to grab her now, because he thinks she won't be able to leave so easily. Belfort approaches them and tells them to stop, then asks how 3 men can resist 1 girl. He then insists that they shouldn't dare call themselves men. Louis says if he doesn't want to get what he wants, then he should go back to where he was going. The blonde guy asks, what will happen if he says he won't leave? The man insists it's better for him to leave on good terms. Hearing this, the gentleman smiled and then pounced on the gentleman. The prince asked how about attacking him all at once since he thought it would save time. Belfort has the men down in minutes, and tells them not to even think about calling themselves men. He says if they don't get down by the count of 3, he'll start beating them again. Hearing this, the boys quickly ran away. The gentleman thought he couldn't believe such bandits still existed, and thought he needed to order a stronger guard. Belfort asks the girl what her relationship is with a lady named Circinia. She asks who he is and why he's asking about this lady. The gentleman says that someday she will find out about this and suggests skipping this part, and then asks who Circinia is to her. Byrne asks why she has to tell him this. Hearing this, he looks at the girl and thinks she's just like a cat, with her fur standing on end, baring her teeth. The girl asks him to explain why he is looking for Mistress Circinia. He thought she was interesting. At this time, the Archduke says that it seems that the sacrifice of gratitude will soon begin, and the girl says that she is waiting with impatience. Circinia thought about how the more she looked at the bracelet, its sparkling purple color reminded her of Ben. She thought that the more time she spent with him, the less she wanted to refuse him. The main character believes that she does not want to miss out on her precious destiny because she knows that this is a selfish desire, and she wonders if it is possible to simply stay in the relationship as it is now. The lady understands that she is afraid because if she rejects him, she will no longer be able to see him, and does not understand why she is so afraid. The host announces that they are beginning the sacrifice ceremony, and they are grateful for this year's harvest and hope that next year will be the same. When the main character saw the fire, she remembered the words of people who said they wanted to finish off this witch. Ben tells the lady that she has turned pale, and then asks if she is unwell, and also wonders if this is possible a memory of the past. Somewhere quiet first. When they were alone, the young gentleman asked the lady if she was okay, and then said that she still remembered those times, and asked if this was true. Circinia thought about how it seemed as if the desire to kill was slowly growing in her hands, and the bastards who see only what they want and hear what they want. And she wondered if they thought that their end would be worthy. The woman's cruel voice rang in her head, sending shivers down her spine, and she remembered how she had slowly smiled as she burned her own hut to the ground. And soon she was already smiling, covered in red liquid, and standing in the middle of the square where the sacrifice ceremony was being held. This incredibly terrifying woman was the main character. Circinia reflects on the fact that she is afraid, because it seems that these events can repeat themselves, and she does not know when she will again feel this terrible desire to finish off. The girl thought that one day she herself, without noticing, would take Ben's life. The young gentleman turns to her and asks her to say something. He takes her hands and thinks he wants her to stop trembling with fear, but he realizes he doesn't need a reason to do so. Ben expresses his desire to protect her and to create a future together. He considers the reason for becoming her protector to spend his entire life with her, to convey to her the true feelings that overwhelm him. Circinia takes her hands back and tells him that she does not share his feelings and explains that she does not feel what he does. At this time, the main character thought that when she saw his facial expression, her chest tightened. The Archduke asks if it won't work at all, and wonders if he can wait a little longer. At this point, the girl thinks she can't give in to weakness, and says that it won't happen anyway. The lady thought that if she delayed her answer, Ben would get hurt more, and she didn't want that. He asked if she was serious, and if this was what she really wanted. Circinia says she doesn't want to be told twice. He says he doesn't know because he's never been in a relationship like this, and therefore simply doesn't know what to do. Ben asks to give him time, and also begs to stay next to him now, and not disappear without saying a word. The girl takes off her jacket and says that she is returning it to her clothes, and then announces that she has to go. Circinia thought Ben looked very upset, but he still gave her his cloak. She looked at the bracelet and thought about how he should take care of himself, and how it constantly occupied her thoughts, as if she were obsessed with it. Byrne tells the lady that she came because she feels like something is bothering her, and then asks if anything happened at the Harvest Festival, because she understands that she is not feeling well. The lady says everything is fine, and then says she wants to go outside and get some fresh air. The maid asks if she can help her with anything. The mistress suggests going together, and Byrne agrees. The maid thought she was interested in the mistress, but couldn't ask her about it. Byrne reports that the owner will be heading out for an inspection again tomorrow, and believes that he will likely be very busy for a while. Hearing this, the main character thought that perhaps he was leaving, because he thought that she was uncomfortable, and that he, as always, cared about her, even if it was his own home. The maid asks if she wants tea, and then says that she will also bring snacks, since the mistress has not had breakfast. Circinia thanked the girl for her concern. When she was left alone, Topa thought about how she didn't know when she should leave the mansion since he had asked her not to disappear without a word. The lady considers leaving after discussing everything with him. However, she realizes there are scars on his body that she knows nothing about. Circinia thinks that living in this body, she is running away again. Archon approached her and told her they hadn't seen each other in a while, then asked if he could join her. She agreed. And at that moment, I thought about how she didn't know what business he had with her, but she thought it was something important. The lady says she heard he's leaving for an inspection starting tomorrow and should be busy. The man says they have a lot to check, but they'll be done quickly. Archon asks the lady if she enjoyed the harvest festival. She replies that there was nothing special, just a festival like any other. The Archduke's aide says that His Excellency has been looking very ill lately, and that since the harvest festival, he has been skipping meals and working constantly. The man says he is ashamed to say this, and then asks if she could stay with him and help him. Circinia replies that she can't do that because she believes it's beyond her capabilities. She then reflects that it's because she's so absorbed in her original work that she doesn't know what will happen next. The girl believes that she will not be the one who will be next to him for the rest of his life. Archon tells the lady that he is a sinner. Hearing this, she is surprised and asks why he suddenly says that while desiring a better life for himself, he acted selfishly towards His Excellency. The assistant says that 3 years ago, he was the one who forcibly took him away, and that is why he works only for His Excellency until he dies, because he believes that this is how he can pay him. The main character thought that she had heard something similar because they said that someone from the Archduke's family had kidnapped him, and she would never have thought that it was Archony. Circinia reports that she recently heard a story about Ben getting well 3 years ago, and then says that from that moment on, he was by her side. The man says no one knows what happened to him. The girl asks why he was a slave, and also wonders why they searched for him and brought him back. The main character says that when he was with her 3 years ago, he didn't have them. Archon asks what she's talking about. The lady replies that she's talking about scars that weren't on her back. Archon slammed his fist on the table and then apologized, saying that was all he could say. He explained that he wanted to, but couldn't tell her everything because His Excellency hadn't given him permission. Circinia says she understands and won't ask again. The man thanks her for her understanding, and in closing, sincerely asks her to consider his shameless request. Archon reports that His Excellency wanted to return every day and says it's all his fault, he couldn't. He then says he's fine and the same, and asks for understanding. Meanwhile, the protagonist doesn't understand what the hell happened to Ben. She wonders what this memory is. That's so painful he's hiding it from her. She feels she can't pretend and leave knowing this. Circinia reflects that before she leaves, she really needs to know what happened to Ben, and if possible, she will do everything she can to help him. Byrne apologizes to the lady, as she thought there would be some information that could help her. The lady asks what she's talking about, and then thanks her for coming with her, as she helped change her mood. The man turns to Circinia and then says how one cannot recognize her at first sight. When the maid saw him, she told her mistress that they had to leave. Looking at the girl, the lady thought he was a moneylender, because only he could frighten her like that. The gentleman says there's no need to be so afraid of him. Meanwhile, the main character looks at his light brown hair and blue eyes, and the face she's seeing for the first time somehow seems familiar, as if they've known each other for a long time. Circinia realized that only a prince could wear such clothes. Then she greeted him as His Highness the Crown Prince. The maid was surprised to hear this, and he asked how she knew him. The main character is interested in how many people can bear the Empire's coat of arms. Byrne falls to her knees and begs forgiveness, as she didn't recognize His Highness. He says everything is fine and offers to eat, as he thinks it was actually quite amusing. The maid, surprised, asks how she could have made such a mistake. The mistress replies that everything is fine, since His Highness said he forgives her. The prince tells the lady that he wants her to spend some time with him because he has many questions. At this time, Ben thought that when he comes to this place, the sun's rays falling on the water sparkle, and this place looks like Circinia, and he would like to come there with her. The guy doesn't understand whether his heart will be with her forever, and whether he should let her go for her sake. The assistant informs His Excellency that His Highness the Crown Prince is currently at the Duke's residence, and it seems he went to see the lady immediately after his arrival. Ben says that they will return to the mansion immediately. At this time, the prince says that he will introduce himself officially, and then announces that he, Lemapius Belfar, she is an honored guest of his friend, and it would be impolite of him not to introduce himself. The lady greets His Highness the Crown Prince, and at this time does not understand what this situation is, because she is drinking tea and sitting next to the one who can finish her off. The prince says that he has heard a lot from Alex about her, and then asks if they have resolved the issue with the village. The main character doesn't understand whether he knows what happened there and how much and what else he knows. The blonde man says the Duke had a fight with him about this morning, saying he needed to do it quickly. The girl asks, surprised, why? The prince asks if she knows that the title of Count Dexter was simply taken away, and then says that no one except the emperor can exceed the power of a nobleman on his land. Belfort reports that in order to seize power in a certain territory, a nobleman must be eliminated, and Count Dexter is even a vassal of the Duke of Kalos. He asks if that wouldn't be the same as if the Archduke declared war. Hearing this, the main character doesn't understand why she didn't think of it. After all, he also took care of everything that happened in the village. Cercinia understands that these were things that could not be done simply by the power of the Archduke, and this was a time that she did not want to remember, but she does not understand why she never thought about the efforts he made for her. The prince says he'd like to hear her story. Ben arrives at this point. His Majesty says he's here sooner than expected, and suggests that the gentleman not behave like that, then asks what will happen if the lady gets scared. The Archduke asks what's going on. The prince explains that he refused to introduce his guest to him, so he came himself. Ben turns to the lady and apologizes, then asks if she could return to her room, as he would like to speak privately with His Highness the Crown Prince. She agrees and leaves. The prince says it was interesting talking to her because he thinks they'll see each other again. Cercinia tells Ben she'd like to talk to him later. The Archduke asks His Majesty what he's doing. The prince says he doesn't think he wants to tell him about Ben's name, and then suggests they talk about Cercinia since he recognized her at first sight and never thought he had such high standards. The young gentleman suggests that they stop, and then reminds her that he said that he would not show the slightest interest in her. His Majesty smiled and said that he was not interested in lusting after other people's women, and asked in any case whether it was not too difficult to hide her here. Ben insists. It doesn't matter. Belfort asks if he understands that this will later become his weakness, since anyone who envies him will try to target his weaknesses, and therefore he believes it's not worth showing his emotions like that. The Archduke asks if this is advice, and His Highness says that he is worried about him, and then asks where Bedrick was, because a man named Mercian introduced himself as a butler. Ben explains that he's late, and the gentleman asks where he is. The Archduke says that if he goes there, he won't get out. His Majesty asks what happened, because his complexion speaks for itself. The guy says that everything is fine, but he wonders why his complexion gets worse every day and asks what happened. Belfort suggests that something might have happened to her, and that they might have had a fight. Ben assures him that this is not the case. His Majesty says that if he needs his help, he can ask at any time. The lady asks Bernie if she said she wanted to go to the store, and then says she will be at the cafe, and suggests meeting later. Cercinia recalls Burns saying she received help from the Crown Prince on the day of the Harvest Festival. She believes the details differ, but this is clearly the story of the first meeting of the two main characters. The lady recalls that in the original, after the meeting of the two main characters, the action develops very quickly, and therefore believes that she needs to figure out what is bothering her. When the main character left the cafe, she thought that she had heard so much useless information, because this cafe is visited by many noble ladies, so she thought that she could find the information she needed. Cercinia doesn't know what to do. She's heard that this building is a criminal hangout, and that information can be obtained, and she doesn't know if she should go there. However, she believes that for money, they can get any information. Suddenly, the stranger grabbed the girl by the shoulder, and she turned around and quickly grabbed his hand. He asked if she could let him go, then removed his hood, revealing the prince. The girl, surprised, asks, "His Highness, what he's doing here?" He says she's quite strong. Cercinia apologizes because she mistook him for someone who wanted to harm her. He protests, claiming it was his fault for sneaking up behind her. The protagonist doesn't understand why they've run into each other again. His Majesty says it seems she's looking for something related to the criminal underworld, and he thinks he could help her. She insists it's her own business. Belfort claims that he could help her because he believes that there is nothing better than his information abilities. The lady thanks him for his words and then says that she is interested in whether he knows what exactly she is looking for and is personally ready to help her. The prince says that's not allowed, even if it's the Grand Duke. She thanked him and thought about how she didn't want to get involved with someone who would kill her in the future. After all, she didn't know how much the Crown Prince knew about Ben. Belfort says he's sorry and suggests not using the Criminal Bureau as it's strictly forbidden in the Empire, and suggests I waste my money. He then says that since she hasn't gone that far yet, he'll tell her one specific thing. The lady assures him that everything is indeed fine. He asks if she knows that in the Grand Duke's house, there is a secret place, deep and dark, hidden so well that no one else will be able to find it. Cercinia, surprised, asks why he's telling her this. The prince replies that since she doesn't know how much he knows, she probably doesn't trust him. His Majesty says that if she checks, she will see if what he says is true. Because he believes that this will show her how much he knows, he suggests checking and talking later. Belfort asks if she's with the wrong woman today. The woman asks if he's talking about Bern, and says she said she needed to pick up something at the store, and they decided to meet later. The prince asks where they agreed to meet, and then says that he will take her there. At this time, the main character thought that, in any case, the meeting between them would take place as in the original, and in this case, it would be better for them to get married quickly, and the story would end. However, the lady does not understand how it happened that she found herself in such a situation, because she knows that they only recently met, but does not know when they managed to become so close. The next day, Bern, surprised, asks if she means to tell him there's a secret place somewhere in the mansion. The lady thanks him for helping her find it. Cercinia recalls the prince's words about being hidden in a very deep and dark place, so most people wouldn't be able to find him. She imagines the basement to be a very deep and dark place in the mansion. The lady believes that since this is a secret place, they will not find any stairs or doors, because she understands that it will be too noticeable, and she tries to press every engraving that looks like a secret button. Cercinia asks if this is true. May suggests searching a little more, but the maid says they haven't even had time to explore half the mansion yet. The lady says that this is too big a place, and the little girl then offers to let her rest, and says that they will then look around the extension. Bern says she'll also take another look at the places they've already visited to see if they missed anything. The main character thanked them and suggested that they split up and search, and at that time she thought that she hoped that they were not searching in vain. Suddenly, Cercinia saw Lady Aronia Blenhuan, who was sitting with the master, and she became curious about what they were doing there together without servants. Cercinia noticed that this woman was smiling so brightly, so different from how she had acted when she'd ignored her. She wondered if Ben knew how two-faced she was. The main character doesn't understand what she just thought, because she thinks it's so childish, because she refused Ben, and understands that she shouldn't care about the affairs of these two. However, the lady became interested in what they were talking about, and why this girl was smiling like that, and thought that maybe they were discussing an engagement, and thought that she needed to see Ben's reaction. May asks the lady why she's so scared, and also wants to know if she's secretly peeping. She replies that she's not just looking. The little girl says that the lady was scared, as if she caught her peeping. And then they peeped together, and she saw that the Archduke smiled, and then left. Suddenly, the young gentleman stood up and walked to the door, then opened it and thought that someone had arrived, and he clearly heard someone calling Cercinia. He realized that her scent lingered in the empty corridor. Ben returned to the conversation, and Aronia thought that he had an indifferent face again. And when they recently talked about the bracelet, he definitely smiled a little, and for the first time, she saw such a bright smile on him. The lady considered the possibility of another visit, and then said she was very surprised that he was wearing bracelets. The gentleman said it was late, and thought she'd better leave, then announced he wouldn't see her out. May asks the lady why she broke the pen, and also wonders if she was very angry because he was smiling at her. Cercinia asks why she should be angry about this, The girl asks if that's true, and why she's angry, and then asks if she was angry. The lady explains that this is because he has never shown this facial expression to anyone except her before, and this has never happened. The little girl claims she's jealous because the Archduke was smiling at another girl. The lady objects and suggests they stop this nonsense. May asks if she likes him, and then claims that this is why she is jealous of him. Cercinia thought for a moment and didn't know what to answer, and then asked the girl if she didn't want to go to the market, and therefore thought that she needed to make it before the gates closed. May says that it is now noon, but she still left. When the main character is left alone, she doesn't understand why she couldn't immediately refute May's words. She ponders why she dislikes him smiling at someone else, and why she wants him to smile only with her, and for his heart to beat faster when she calls him by name. The girl thought about his blushing face when their eyes met, and even at the moment when she had to reject him, how his heart shattered into pieces, and she wants him to show all this only to her. Cercinia understands that she has already given up on him, and therefore believes that she cannot behave and think like that either. The lady became curious why the drinking water had run out just now, although she had been drinking cold water all day. When she returned to her room, she saw a guy standing near her door. She wondered why Ben was there. The young gentleman standing at the door says that he likes Cercinia, and he is worried about her, and therefore asks if she is wandering alone at night more and more often, and if she is in pain. Hearing these words, the lady sat down on the floor and thought that she was not able to look at him now, and the way he looked was similar to the state he was in 3 years ago. The main character thought that, in fact, she had long ago understood the reason why she looked at the locked door every day, and believed that she had long known that she liked Ben. The next day, Byrne says that today she will look in another direction, and the lady agrees with her and says that they will see each other later. The lady asks the little girl if she's coming with her. The girl says she is and asks if the lady is okay. Cercinia reminds him of yesterday's conversation, where the girl said she liked when May, surprised, says she denied it. But the lady counters saying she's right, and then reveals she likes him. May says she knew it and thought so, and then apologizes for scaring her yesterday. She says they can now officially date because they like each other. The lady informs him that she turned him down. The girl surprised asks when he managed to confess, and then says that the more important question is why she turned him down and asks about it. Cercinia explains that it's because she doesn't want him to get into trouble because of her. Then she explains to the girl that she understands how they live together. The little girl suggests that the lady try to think only about her feelings, throwing away everything she wants, and then says that she will go the other way. When the main character was left alone, she became interested in what she wanted and realized that she had never thought about it. And if she did what she wanted, and trouble happened, she realized that she could hurt him with her own hands. The lady believes that from the moment she became a Cercinia, she just wants to become ordinary. At this time, the young gentleman thought that he was having nightmares again, and then called Archine and said that he should see a doctor because he thought he needed a prescription for sleeping pills. The assistant says that he will then call the family doctor, but the gentleman objects and says that he will go himself. Archine reported that he'd been told that Cercinia had breakfast and gone for a walk. Hearing this, Ben thought the main thing was that she was still with him. The Archduke thought that perhaps because of his request, his selfishness was irritating, but he believed that he had no choice but to keep her close, at least like that. At this point, the main character realized that not only was there no secret door visible, but she couldn't even find anything resembling one. She believed the Crown Prince was simply mocking her and thought that people's feelings were a joke to him. Suddenly, Cercinia saw a dark corridor and wondered if this place had ever been there. She realized that even though it was an extension, she didn't know why it was so dirty with dust flying around and a disgusting smell. The lady realized there was a dead end at the end of the corridor, and she remembered the words that strangers were not allowed in there, and then she punched the wall. Suddenly, an opening appeared, and she saw a staircase leading down. The main character became curious about what it was. The maid turns to the lady and says she doesn't know how she got there, then informs her that outsiders are not allowed in. Seeing her, the lady doesn't understand when she arrived, and the maid says this isn't a place where just anyone can go. Cercinia says she needs to check something, and she will quickly look around and leave. The woman nudges the lady and asks who will let her in. The lady explains she's just looking, and then, without realizing it, ends up behind a door near the stairs. The maid pushed her mistress, causing her to fall. The maid asks how a woman of unknown origin dares pretend to be mistress, and so suggests she realize her place, then says she thinks that's where she belongs. At that moment, the girl thought that whatever the case, it was wrong to push people down the stairs. She used her powers to light a fire at the tip of her finger and thought that since the opportunity presented itself, she'd check the place out. Circinia realized it was very dark and cold there, and she would never have imagined that such a cold and damp place lay beneath such a luxurious mansion. She wondered why they were hiding it so carefully. After walking for a few minutes, she realized that this was a prison, but it looked like there was no one there, and she didn't understand why they would make such a place underground and thought that all aristocrats had one. The girl doesn't understand why the crown prince told her about this place. Suddenly, she saw a camera and thought about it because there was a toilet bucket next to the bed and a metal chain with shackles whistling from the ceiling, and there were even rods outside and a leather whip for punishing criminals. Circinia looked at the whip and thought that the blow would probably leave elongated scars like that. She remembered the boy's words about how he'd received these wounds during training and that it was nothing special. The main character does not understand how he could say that there is nothing special about it. She became interested in who did this to Ben. Suddenly, the lady heard a voice that said that he was like a demon who knew no mercy, who would destroy everything, and he did not understand how he dared his master. Circinia, surprised, asks, "Who is there?" The man says it's the red hair, and then asks if she is Circinia. The lady asks how he knows her name. He says he knows her very well, having heard of her many times, and judging by the fact that she's here, that bastard finally brought her to the Archduchy. The girl asks if the demon is a bastard, and also inquires as to who he gave such nicknames to. He replies that the half-breed who brought her to this house is a demon who will destroy this family. The stranger says it seems he didn't tell her anything, but she followed him anyway. The lady asks who he is to say such a thing. The man replies that he is the Bedrick Eyes, Ears, Hands, and Feet of the Shorebark family, and then says that in this family, absolutely everything goes through him. Hearing this name, the main character thought that it was familiar to her, and she remembered that this was the only butler who had worked in the family for a long time and who left due to health problems. But she does not understand what he is doing here. Bedrick says he and his master had planned their entire lives, and he ruined them in a second. The man can't understand how this illegitimate son of his master dared harm him. Upon hearing this, the girl, surprised, asks who the illegitimate child is. The butler explains that everything he owns originally had a different owner, and then reveals that he's simply a fake who's lived his entire life hiding behind the shadow of the true owner, believing this to be the most fitting life for a half-breed. Circinia tells him not to dare spout nonsense if he knows nothing about him. She believes that someone like him would never understand how much effort he put into it. Bedrick screams and says that this bastard will destroy everything because he believes that without genes, this half-breed will not be able to achieve anything, and then claims that this applies to her too. At this point, the main character doesn't understand how Ben lived all this time and believes it was hard for him to survive those 3 years. She wonders how much he suffered alone in this place. The lady climbed the stairs and then used her strength to smash the door. When the maid saw her, she asked in surprise how she got out, but the lady didn't answer, only suggested she disappear, and then gave her a hard shove. At this time, Circinia realized that she missed Ben and wanted to hear his story, and she wanted to know everything about him. The mistress, screaming, asks the maids where Ben is. Archie, surprised, asks what happened. She explains that she's just returning from the outbuilding and reports finding a secret cellar where she met a man named Bedrick. The lady reports that she also discovered a prison with traces of human habitation. She then asks if Ben was held there, as she believes the wounds on his back were caused by a whip hanging on the wall. Hearing this, the man says that they better continue the conversation elsewhere because he thinks there are too many ears here. Then they retire to a room the main character asks to tell her now. Archie asks her what it's like to live someone else's life. She asks if he's talking about Ben now, and he insists everything she said is correct. The gentleman's assistant says that His Excellency is an illegitimate child, the illegitimate child of the former Archduke. Archon reports that the former Archduke also had a legitimate child from his legal wife, but he was so ill that he could not appear in public, and his room was left only after he fell asleep. The former Archduke was a man of great ambition. His greatest desire in life was to sit on the throne, and to do this, he needed a lineage that would give him power. The man recalls that 3 years ago, he grabbed Ben. The guy didn't understand why they were doing this to him and asked about it. When the Archduke saw this boy, he ordered him locked up. He recalls how the boy begged to be let out because he had to return to Cercinia. 3 days later, he stopped eating, and the man said his name was Archon Bren, then asked to be let out because he had to go as the girl was waiting for him. The man suggests that from now on, you listen carefully to what he has to say, and then announces that His Excellency, the great Archduke Shorvartza, is his father. Archon says that even though he's an illegitimate child, he'll soon become part of this family. The boy is surprised to hear this and says he doesn't need it. Ben argues that this is unnecessary and therefore suggests simply sending him back as the girl is waiting for him. He asks to be allowed to leave. The man says that if he wants to meet Cercinia, he must listen to what he has to say. He reveals that the Grand Archduke's only legitimate son, Alexander Schwartz, has been ill since birth and has never appeared in public. Archon says that if for some reason he dies, the guy will live under this name, and if this happens, he will be able to go to the girl, and therefore suggests that he eat first, because he needs to become even healthier than he is now. Hearing this, Ben wonders if they'll definitely be able to meet. Then the man assures him that they will, but first he needs to get stronger. The guy started eating, but he was still wondering how she was doing without him and whether she was waiting for him. He hoped she would continue living her normal life without any problems. The young man hoped that she would live a normal and peaceful life, thinking about him from time to time. A month later, Ben asks when he can go out. The man suggests he just wait a little longer. And then he thinks about how a month has passed since they brought Ben with them. But Alexander is still showing signs of recovery compared to before. The guy asks to be more clear about when he can be released. Archon understands that Ben is Alexander's replacement, and he won't be able to leave prison until Alexander dies. The man understands that if this continues, Ben may go crazy out of boredom. 3 months later, the Archduke tells the boy to calm down, because he believes there is no reason to be so angry, and thinks that it is worth taming him. The master told the servants to tie the boy up, then took a whip and began to beat him. The boy lost consciousness from the pain, and the master said that if he tried to resist, they should beat him. Archon saw the guy. He thought that even an animal shouldn't be treated like that, because he understands that even if he is an illegitimate child, he is also the child of the Archduke. 6 months later, Archon tells the guy that he will die this way, and so gives him one thing and asks him to take care of himself. Ben states that if something like that could have killed him, he would have died long ago, and then thanks him for the medication. His assistant asks if he'll take a break from training today. The man says that 6 months have passed since the first time a whip was used on him, and then he began secretly teaching him fencing, because he wanted this guy to gain strength, because he hoped that this way he would become stronger. Archon says he'd like to atone for his guilt this way. Then he remembers that this guy always mentioned Cercinia's name and never forgot about her for a second. One day the guy asked why he shouldn't use the name Ben, because the one who gave him the name, and with her own hands, tore up the documents the fish that were shackled like Candelas. The father overheard the conversation, and the next day asks why he is so surprised, and also wonders if he didn't shout out the name Cercinia. The gentleman asks how he dared to say her name, and then says that killing this woman is much easier than trampling an ant. The father says that if he again resists his words, that woman will be in trouble, and then asks if he understands. Archon reports that 2 years and 8 months passed. The Duke said that in a week there would be a banquet to celebrate the Crown Prince's birthday, and on that day, Ben would officially appear there as Alexander Shorbark. Since Alexander Shorbark's death, and 2 weeks later, he was released from the basement. He had been locked in the basement for over 2.5 years, obediently obeying the Duke. They had brainwashed him 100 times a day, calling him the image of an aristocrat and giving him lessons in the heir's role. Father said that he doesn't need to think, because reflection and other things don't exist for him, since he believes that he just has to do what he's told. On the day of the Crown Prince's birthday celebration, The emperor says with surprise that the rumors about his recovery were true, and then says that he is glad to see his nephew healthy again. Ben greeted the son of the Belfar Empire and introduced himself as Alexander Shorbark, and sincerely congratulated His Highness the Crown Prince on his birthday. The man turns to His Highness and apologizes, then says he needs to tell him something. Ben asks if he could spare him a moment. The prince says that, given that he is addressing him personally, he believes that His Majesty should not know about this conversation. The gentleman claims that if he cares about the empire, he asks to devote time to him. The prince suggests stepping away for a moment, as he wants to talk a little with his cousin, and then asks what he has to say to him. His Highness says that if this is empty chatter, he will have to pay for it. Ben reports that the Archduke is planning a rebellion and is gradually increasing his power. The prince is surprised to hear this, and the boy announces that he will soon lead a rebellion and invade the palace. Belfort asks if this is true, and the young gentleman claims that it is a fact. The prince asks how he could do such a thing, since he believes His Majesty valued his uncle and in return received a knife in the back. The prince asks if he supports his actions. Ben informs His Highness that he does not share the Duke's views. The prince, surprised, asks how he can trust him, a relative of the Duke. The guy claims that their blood relationship means nothing, since he is only the illegitimate son of the Duke. Ben says that the Duke considered the sickly Alexander to be a risk for rebellion, so he brought him to the duchy immediately after the Duchess's death. The guy says that for 3 years he was tortured in the dungeon under the pretext of training as a second-line heir, and then asks if he should follow his instructions after that. The Duke reports that he will suppress this rebellion for His Majesty and asks to be allowed to share with him information about the location of the rebel bases. Ben says he'd like to ask a favor in return. The prince smiles and offers to speak. The boy asks to be granted the title of Duke. His Majesty, surprised, asks if he wants to save the rebellious family. The gentleman says that he can deprive the Shorbark of influence and power, and he will be happy with the empty title, because the main thing for him is to get the title, and he swears that he will be on his side, and then says that he will put his life on the line. Ben claims that if his actions in any way harm His Highness, he has the right to take his life. At that moment, the boy thought about how a toothless tiger remains a tiger, and that even if he were to become a duke, even if he had no power, it would be enough to protect her. After all, he understood that this was all he needed. A few months later, with the help of His Highness the Crown Prince, he launched a surprise attack on the rebel bases and routed them before the rebellion had even begun. When the knights arrived in the Duchy of Contrade to arrest the Duke for treason, he had already breathed his last. Ben saw this with his own eyes, and the emperor, who truly loved his brother, decided to keep this situation a secret, so the public still doesn't know about what happened. Archon says he's sorry it happened. Hearing this, the main character thought that in the novel, his life was described in one line, and she does not understand who could have thought that this line hid such a story. Cercinia thought she'd let him down by disappearing without a word. Sometimes she'd get angry, sometimes she'd cry, trying in vain to forget him, but sometimes she'd hope he was okay. And as time went on, the emptiness in her heart didn't disappear. The girl recalls that sometimes she even genuinely laughed with May, and there were days when she didn't think about him at all. She understands that he was then in the dark dungeon, waiting for their meeting. The main character believes that he endured these terrible 3 years to be with her, and all this time he only had her. Cercinia says that she must meet him, and then announces that it is time for her to go. Archon asks the lady to wait, but she doesn't seem to hear him, and is thinking about her own thoughts, that she finally understood why he smiled so happily when she called him Ben. The lady understands that if they hadn't met, he wouldn't have the name she gave him, and would have lived his life as Alexander. However, she doesn't know what to say when they meet. She wonders if she'll be able to say anything at all. Suddenly, Cercinia saw the bracelet and thought about how old and worn it was, the threads having lost their color. She remembered that it was the bracelet she and Ben had bought together, and realized he had been keeping it all this time. The main character firmly decided that she would no longer run away and turn away from the unknown future. The girl knows that she has feelings for Ben, but she is afraid of the unknown, and she wants to be on his side and next to him because she loves this guy. When the young gentleman entered his office, he couldn't understand why Cercinia was there. He assumed she wanted to end their relationship because he asked her not to disappear without saying a word. Ben asks her to leave because he doesn't want to hear anything about her. After all, she told him to be greedy. The young gentleman says that he is greedy towards her, but she does not accept this greed, and he does not understand what to do. The guy asks to answer him because he really doesn't understand. The girl reports that she learned about what happened over the course of 3 years after his disappearance and how he was kept in prison, and that the name Alexandmikan does not belong to him. Hearing this, the guy surprised asks how she knew. The girl asks why he kept quiet, since she didn't know about it, and kept looking for him. Ben says it's in the past, because he thinks everything is fine now. She asks how he can say that considering his back is scarred, and he's living under a false name. Hearing this, the guy thought about how he didn't want her to find out, because he wanted to appear strong in her eyes, so she wouldn't be afraid to rely on him. And then he tells her he doesn't need her sympathy and